Okay.
Right,
Okay. This is live from the table, the official podcast of New York's world famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Raw Dog and on the Laugh Button Podcast Network. This is Dan Naturman. I'm, of course, with Noam Dworman, the owner of the world famous Comedy Cellar. Periel Aschenbrand is with us. She's our producer and an on-air personality in her own right. It just kind of evolved. Wasn't planned that way, but that's what happened. Published author as well, yes. Has a couple of memoirs out, which we'll discuss. Danny Cohen is with us. He's a frequent guest. He is a Comedy Cellar regular. He is a tie maker. T-I-E. He makes ties. He designs ties. He makes ties. They're embroidered ties. They're lovely ties. You can get them, Danny, where?
At DannyCohenTies.com.
Danny Cohen Ties. Easy enough. Okay, folks. We also have a guest coming a little bit later, Will Wilkinson. And he's a former think tank research director. We'll talk to him. But first, there's a couple of comedy related.
Fired from the New York Times for telling a joke, but go ahead.
We'll get to all of those things. Is he no longer at the Nikiasen Center or whatever that's?
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Because in his bio it says former research director.
We'll find out.
I don't want to give him an introduction that he's not going to like.
Miss Cannon. Introduction.
Okay. Well, first of all, I got an email from, I guess, Liz Furiati, the general manager of the Comedy Cellar, saying, hey, come on down. The Olive Tree Cafe, which is the restaurant above the Comedy Cellar, will be open this week. Come on down, say hello, have dinner. Noam?
Yes, that's true. We're going to be open at 25% capacity, which is means we're going to start losing more money again. But I guess it's the right thing to do. I don't know. This is the worst.
But Noam, what about stand-up? Will comics be allowed to perform if they drop by? Will there be a stage available and a mic?
Well, we have that mic. We have that. Somebody got their speaker on. We have that stage set up in the Olive Tree. We're not allowed to have shows, but comedians, if they want to illicitly go up there and and tell jokes to each other. We're not going to have any scheduled shows or anything like that. But when we were open last time, it just became like a clubhouse for the comedians to hang out, which is important, and it's an important part of our function in the comedy community. So we're going to do it. But hopefully with the vaccine and everything that's going on, shortly enough, we will be allowed actually to have a real.
I keep reading articles that are saying, well, we're going to have to live with this virus, vaccine or no vaccine.
I don't understand that. Do you?
No, I don't understand it either. If the vaccine is that effective, what the hell are they talking about?
I mean, either the vaccine works and we're going to get rid of this virus, or one of these mutant strains is going to be immune to the vaccine and we're going to be right back in the shitter where we were. Like, I don't see any middle ground.
I can explain.
Really? Go ahead.
All right, Noam's a little skeptical of that, but go ahead.
Place your bets. Go ahead.
So even if you're vaccinated, the virus can still live in your nose hair, which means that even you can get it. You won't get sick from it, but you can still give it to somebody else. And also children have not yet been vaccinated, as we all know, and then also the mutant strains. So those are the three reasons why it's not so clear cut.
Go ahead, Noam.
No, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
To take those points in turn. Number one, children will be vaccinated at some point. Number two, the mutant strains will hopefully be prevented by the vaccine. If not, as Noam said, we're right back where we started. And as far as the virus still living and you can transmit it, if the vaccine works, you won't be able to transmit it.
No, because not everybody will have been vaccinated.
The nose hair thing is highly theoretical. Nobody knows if the nose hairs are really, but even if it's true, it's going to be a tiny number of people. Number one. Number two, the vaccine, what is it, like 95% of everybody who's died has been in high-risk groups. And once everybody in the high-risk groups is vaccinated, then, as I understand it, we're reduced to a disease which is no deadlier to the remaining people than the flu is. So why would we like, you know, like we're going to move on. I mean, even if we didn't want to move on, you think you're going to convince a bunch of 20-year-olds to stay home when all the 65-year-olds have been vaccinated and you know, going about their lives? It's not going to work. So we're either my prediction is either a mutant strain comes along or we're putting this behind us in a few months once we're vaccinated. That's what I say.
That makes sense. It's also vaccine also lasts about 6 months, 7 months. So the vaccine.
We don't know that either. We don't know that either.
You can get revaccinated.
You have to get revaccinated.
You know,
so who knows? Some people might forget, and then they're not vaccinated, and then they're, you know, open to getting the virus. It's crazy. Whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree that the virus won't go away completely. Even polio, I think, still exists here and there in some parts of the world. You know, there's certain diseases that are pretty much gone in most of the world, but they still kind of exist. So, you know, even if it still exists, does this mean that we're going to have to change our lifestyles, or can we go on as we were before? And I think Noam is saying we'll be able to go on as we were before.
We have to.
Media being sensational. I think they're just, you know, hyping it up and making everybody. It's just, you know, it's media. It's just everyone's like, it's all hype. It's fine. I mean, it's gonna be okay.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, I think so.
Look, yeah. I don't know where you guys went to medical school, but what I studied was that.
God. Where did you find this woman?
If everybody's not vaccinated, though, doesn't it never go away? Isn't that the problem?
Well, never going away is one thing, but being present enough to disrupt our lives. Like I said, polio, I don't think has gone away. I think it still exists here and there.
It's like every other disease we're vaccinated against. It's first of all, you only need, I mean, you hear various numbers, 75, 85% of people to be immune for the R naught to go significantly below 1, so it peters out on its own. But the more important point to me is that once the people who are like, not everybody dies from COVID. Kids don't die from COVID. I mean, you know, young people don't die from COVID.
Well, sometimes.
Some people die of everything. But if the entire population had the same risk that 25-year-olds have of dying from COVID,
right?
We wouldn't have never shut down anything. We would have just been careful. We would have shut down the economy over a disease that has a 1 in 20,000 or whatever it is. We shut it down because 20-30% of old people and high-risk people were dying. But we're not going to shut down the whole economy once it's only young people. And besides, I mean, we have vaccinations for many diseases, right? Why is this one considered to be different than all this? I mean, it's the same as all of them.
I think they compare it to the flu, where it could mutate and we have to find a new vaccine every year.
And we'll have to do that. Yeah, that's a scary thought. We don't know. Although on the other hand, I just read an article that some other people think that with this new technology, we may be able to come up with a vaccine which is all-purpose against all coronaviruses, including the common cold. They're talking about actually eradicating the common cold now. So who knows?
I've eradicated the common cold by not leaving the house all year. I mean,
I'm putting my money on medical science. I think I'm a big optimist. All the people who are telling us it's going to take years for a vaccine, Periel, by the way, I mean, they were all so wrong. Of course, part of that was just because Trump was president, so they had to embrace the most dire outcome. It's true. They were saying that Trump was lying about. We talked about it. They were saying that Trump was lying about having a vaccine altogether. They were saying that like 3 weeks before the vaccine came out. These hard-nosed reporters were really like calling up Pfizer and Moderna, and somehow, you know, they didn't spend 2 seconds trying to find out whether it was true or not. They just said he's lying. There's no vaccine. But he wasn't lying.
I do want to, before Will gets here, also touch on one other important comedy-related issue. Mr. Dave Chappelle has apparently gotten a huge payoff, whatever, from Comedy Central. Just to review, the Chappelle show, the Comedy Central Chappelle show, was sold to Netflix. Netflix was airing it, and then Chappelle said, "I'd rather you don't air it. They didn't treat me very well. They ripped me off when I was young and naive. I would appreciate it, Netflix, as a favor to me, if you don't air this show," and Netflix complied. Well, apparently, Comedy Central paid off Dave Chappelle to the tune of several $1 million. And Chappelle said they've made the pass right. I can finally say it's a pleasure doing business with Comedy Central, and the Chappelle Show will now be airing on Netflix. Comments and thoughts on that?
Danny?
So who did he say that to? He said that to Comedy Central, that they mistreated him, and he didn't want them to stop.
He said that to the public. He said, look, Comedy Central, when I was young and desperate, they gave me a bad deal. We don't know what the deal was. My guess is he made far more than the average American made, but it was a bad deal in his mind. And it also made him famous. But it was a bad deal in his mind, and therefore he felt that Netflix should not air these episodes because he was not making any extra money from these episodes.
Well,
so Netflix said, as a favor to Dave, Netflix said, okay, we want to air the episodes. We want to do business with Dave Chappelle. We're not going to air the episodes.
Oh, so then Comedy Central came up and paid him for...
So Comedy Central said, all right, Dave, we're going to make the pass right. We're going to pay you whatever, millions of dollars, according to Dave. Dave said, great, now we're square, and we can air these episodes on Netflix.
Perfect. I think that's a great... that's how you do business. Wonderful. I'm glad it worked out.
Well, I mean, we said on the show back then that I said that I thought this was, negotiating, and it turns out it was. Normally, it's unbecoming. You say a deal is a deal, and we talk about it time. For instance, Comedy Central, Dave's show could have bombed, right? And Comedy Central wouldn't have come to him and say, listen, we want the $10 million back or whatever is money, that we cost us to pay you and produce the show. But there is this gray area where you make a deal and then something totally unforeseen creates a windfall for one party or the other. And I think that what happened here is that when Chappelle, I don't know this, but I think that I'm right here. When Chappelle negotiated the Chappelle Show, the hot issue at that time was DVD rights. Streaming was not on anybody's radar. And now all of a sudden there are millions of dollars to be made from streaming and Comedy Central. And Chappelle says, you know what? Fuck, this doesn't seem fair to me. They're making millions of dollars. If we had known about it, of course they would have given me a share of that money. So I have some leverage here. My leverage is, you can say what you want about it, but it's real leverage. I was like, I'm going to tell the public, this is bullshit. Comedy Central's making all this money and I'm not getting my share, and I don't want you to watch it and people love Chappelle. And that leverage made Comedy Central say uncle. So they settled up for some amount of millions of dollars. And, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. It's certainly not the case. It's not the same case if somebody tries to renegotiate a deal where there were no new facts that came to light and there were no unknowns. It's really true that nobody had any idea that there was this pot of gold, which with Comedy Central was keeping in its side of the ledger, and Chappelle didn't even know it existed.
Well,
right?
Comedy Central didn't know it existed either. It's not like Comedy Central was saying doing
right.
this, saying, "Ooh, we're going to get stream," and Dave doesn't even know streaming is coming up. But
that's my point.
So
that's my point.
But I don't blame either. I don't blame.
It's like this, Dan. If you sell me your old guitar,
mm-hmm.
and it's a shitty guitar, and I buy it for $20, and I take it home, and there's $10 million inside the whole of that guitar, and I'd be like, but you'd say, listen, yeah, but maybe you should share some of that money back. Like, we didn't know. And a mensch would say, a gentleman would say, you're right. Let's make a deal for this $10 million.
I'll give you $1 million, because whatever, you're still going to make a lot of money with the guitar. But you just give him a little bit just to settle, because you know why? Because you both like each other. Nobody wants to fight.
Noam and I are friends. Comedy Central and Chappelle were doing an arm's length negotiation.
Well, but nobody wants to be.
The analogy is an interesting one. I don't know if it, like every analogy, it's not a 100% perfect fit. Right. I look at it this way. Good for Dave if he could pull it off. I don't believe he's a hero. I don't believe he was wronged by Comedy Central. I don't believe he was a victim of Comedy Central's overreaching. I believe he had power. He was able to pull it off. God bless him. But I don't.
It's not much of a story.
I don't see it as. But some people see it as a victory of good over evil, in a sense.
That's hilarious.
No,
Really, that would be a lot. I don't.
No, it's
I
nice
don't.
To see it's nice to see the artist getting his due. I mean, I do think that even if it was
the artist, this particular artist, has been getting his due for 20 years.
but well earned,
I mean,
you know, and rightly so.
All right, but
I think we should.
it's nice to see him get his due. It's not like he hasn't been a millionaire for a couple of decades.
I'd say the following. I've been treated very nicely by Dave Chappelle. I've been treated very nicely by Comedy Central. I have no idea what the initial deal was, how much he got paid. We simply don't have enough facts. If we were really wanted to.
Well, what if the initial deal was what initial deal would you say is scandalous and unconscionable, I guess is the legal term. I mean, if he were being paid $100,000 an episode for the original deal, would you say that was reasonable?
No, there's no deal which is scandalous.
I mean, if it was $50 an episode, I'd say, yeah, this was overreaching. They took advantage. But I suspect it was probably more money than the average teacher, the average construction, hardworking people.
It's also complicated by the fact that he walked away from the third season, was it, or the fourth season, and he left $50 million, I think is the number they were going to pay him. $50 million. So,
yeah, right.
It wasn't like they go ahead.
I think it's scandalous what happened to the Brady Bunch cast.
Oh, that's a lot worse.
Brady Bunch aired for years and years and years, and they never saw a cent because when they signed their contract, there was no such thing as syndication.
Yeah.
And so they made their money on the show, and that was the end of that. And Schultz never gave them a penny more.
Schwartz.
Ever.
Schwartz,
sorry.
Well, that's a
German instead of Jewish. But yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, as long as Comedy Central is happy and Dave's happy, I think it's nice that they settled it, because I think it doesn't sit right when somebody's making millions and millions and millions of dollars from a revenue stream that was not on the table and was not negotiated.
Sure. 100%.
Good for Comedy Central for settling and for negotiating and for working it out. Good for them, I think. Good for both.
They had all that money. I don't know why they canceled my show, but anyway, go ahead.
Also, not having all
in these contracts, they typically say all media now known or will be divided. I mean, they sort of include the possibility of other media being devised. It's not completely unpredictable that some other media will come about, and I mean, that's not completely unforeseeable.
Yeah, if you have a good lawyer.
And and Dave was represented by, I assume, competent counsel as well as management. Maybe, I mean, arguably he was.
Can we get to the heart of the matter here?
Yeah.
It burns Dan up to see Chappelle making millions of dollars.
It doesn't burn me up. Chappelle, if it burned me up, it would have burned me up the past 20 years that he was making money, or 25.
But not because it's Chappelle, just because it's somebody.
No, it doesn't burn me up. I think for him to tell his fans, who are hardworking people, I gather, that make not even a fraction of what he makes, look, I need your help to make more money because Comedy Central ripped me off. That does not sit exquisitely with me. If he's able to negotiate more money, God bless him, but he's not a victim and he's not a hero.
We don't know that. And Chappelle, I mean, we don't know that, and we all know Chappelle, and it doesn't sound like him, what you're describing, because he's always been a gentleman and nice to everybody, and always been.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't fit that profile to me, and he doesn't have to tone. He's entitled to what he's entitled to. He doesn't have to tone. He doesn't have to forego it because other people make less than him. Okay, let's bring in Will Wilkinson. Listen.
He doesn't have to forego it, but he's also not a victim. Yeah,
I don't know that he's not a victim. Rich people can be victims of somebody cheating them.
Well,
go ahead.
Possibly, but there's no evidence to suggest.
Not cheating them. I'm saying rich people.
There's no evidence to suggest that it was a scandalous deal. Maybe it was. Of course, we don't know. I mean, my guess is they paid him. Look, you know what they paid you every week for your show.
It wasn't Chappelle money.
It wasn't Chappelle money, but I'm sure it was. The average person would be happy to get it. We have with us Will Wilkinson. Hello, Will. We've just been discussing Dave Chappelle and Comedy Central, in case you were wondering.
An excellent comedian and a terrific cable channel.
Okay, so you are on neither one side nor the other in that dispute. Will Wilkinson, by the way, just to introduce our listeners to him and our viewers on YouTube, he was the vice president for research at the Niskanen Center, a centrist DC think tank. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
No, it's Niskanen.
I think I got it more or less correct. It wasn't that horrific a massacre, but it wasn't a perfect.
You're going to get hate mail from Finnish people.
It does sound a little Finnish. It reminds me of that Matti Nuukkonen, who was the ski jumper. He produces a newsletter and podcast, both titled Model Citizen at Substack, and his writing has appeared in multiple publications, including The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Economist, where he was the U.S. politics correspondent. Please welcome Will Wilkinson to our podcast. Hello, Will.
Hello.
Hello.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Can I start?
Yes. Well,
I'm totally fascinated by Mr. Wilkinson. But can I call you Will?
Absolutely.
I'm totally fascinated by Will let's go through it, because to me, you were somebody who was treated completely unfairly. We're two kinds of the people who treated unfairly. Then, in my opinion, I want to hear what you say about it. Then, in my opinion, sort of have been similarly unfairly to others, in my opinion. And you'll, I'm sure, disagree with me. And I just find and obviously you're extremely bright, and it's just very interesting to me. So let's start with my, where you came on my radar, which is when you got fired by the New York Times for telling a joke. You want to tell the story to the listeners?
I got fired from the Niskanen Center for telling the joke.
And the Times severed their relationship with you. Is that correct?
No, I'm just kind of like in a timeout with them.
I thought I read that they issued a statement that.
Yeah, I'm on hiatus until March or April.
Okay, they made you stand in the corner.
Yeah.
So tell the listeners what the horrible tweet that you got in all this trouble for was.
Well, I wrote about it recently. Like, Republicans keep being like, if Joe Biden really wants unity, he'll, fill in the blank with something that Republicans wanted to do anyway. Because in the inauguration, in his big speech, Biden, said, beautiful things about the need for the country to come together and heal. What he was talking about is that it's a bad deal when a bunch of Republicans sack Congress while they're counting the electoral votes in order to try to overturn a legitimate democratic election. He's like, that's kind of like bad, and maybe we should try to overcome the level of division that creates that kind of heinous outcome. But all that time, Republicans, a lot of them are just continuing to feed into the big lie that led to the insurrection in the first place. They wouldn't admit that Biden was the legitimate winner of the election. They kept saying that it was rigged. A bunch of those goons voted, against the certification of, a couple states' electoral votes after, Congress had been attacked and they were routed from their chambers, right? So the insincerity of, being like, oh, if Biden really wants unity, he's not going to sign an executive order about reversing Trump's policy on windmills or something, right? Like, when they wouldn't concede that they're the world's most divisive things. Okay. So my tweet, if you want me to get to that, I just feel like I need to rant to create context.
Okay.
I tweeted that if Biden, really wants, what did I say?
I think he said if Biden really wants unity, he'd lynch Mike Pence.
Yeah, he'd agree to lynch Mike Pence, right? Because and the joke is, all those
they were all
protesters, the mob, they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence."
That's right.
Like they were coming to get him because he wasn't doing his part in the coup attempt, right? Like, and I was like, well, we could all agree that, you know, Mike Pence is shitty, right? Apparently,
So
right?
Will,
Like, so that was the joke.
Will, let me stop you there because
Mhm.
I'm trying hard to understand how much dumbing down do the smartest people in the world expect from us? Is there anybody on planet Earth, or who could really listen to that joke and think that you were calling for violence? That 78-year-old Joe Biden is going to? I mean, it's so obviously a joke. Like, what are they doing to us? And the smartest and the most interesting people, they say stuff like that. They say biting, interesting things, and this kind of that we just can't abide by anybody, even in jest, calling for violence. How can they expect us to swallow that? That's just nonsense, isn't it?
Well, you know, when you work for a place and they see you as a representative of, you know, their public image, they might not want you being, you know, super rash. They might think it, you know, like indicates, you know, a slight lack of discernment or judgment to make cracks like that. You know, like, you know, to be charitable. But the thing that, you know, got me in trouble, it wasn't that people didn't get that it was a joke. It was a bunch of right-wing MAGA enthusiasts who pretended not to get it, and, you know, kept, you know, tweeting, at my employer, you know, tagging the FBI and the Secret Service, you know, like this guy wants to take out the vice president, right? And there was a deluge of this stuff, right? Like, it was completely bad faith. It was opportunistic. I've been very principled and vehemently anti-Trump through the whole administration. So I wouldn't say that I was a thorn in their side, but like I was not friendly to the Trump folks, and they didn't like me, and they saw it as an opportunity to fucking take me down, and it worked. Like, the way it works is like a bunch of people just like pretend not to know that it's a joke, act like you're being completely literal.
Can I stop you there? Because
Yeah.
I didn't take it that way. I took it as them obviously knowing that you were joking, but wanting to see someone of the left hoisted on his own petard. In their minds, and I have some sympathy for this view, but in their minds, they see people canceled, as it were, or for remarks and jokes by the people who, you know, they see as on your side of things. And I was like, well, okay, you do it to us all the time. And so now well, how come, why are you letting him get away with this? You didn't see it as a joke when we said it. So why do you see it as a joke when Will says it? So I'm not defending that. I don't like this. We're descending into a gotcha world. I don't like it at all. I stand against it on both sides, but I don't think they actually pretended not to get it. I think it was clear what they were doing, which was just turning the tables.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were pretending not to get it to turn the tables, right? Like it wasn't that they're like, hey, we know this is a joke, but, you know, those like leftist bastards don't let us get away with edgy jokes. That's not what it was. It was a bunch of people literally like trying to tell the FBI and my employer that I was trying to get Mike Pence killed. That's what they were saying.
That's terrible.
You were inciting violence.
Yeah, that I was inciting violence, and there's like a whole system for this, right? Like, so people, you know, kind of go around and find find people that they don't like who are saying something that's outrageous, that might be just, you know, they might mean it, and might be a joke. They create a little shitstorm online about it, and then the kind of right-wing media institutions. So like within hours, like the Federalist, the Daily Caller, you know, like Breitbart, Fox News website, they'd all written a story about this. Like, and it's written in a relatively straight journalism style that just kind of describes what's going on. But like the point of that is to amplify the controversy and to bring people into Twitter to yell at you even more. And if you've done a really great job, the producers at, Fox News shows, Tucker Carlson and all those guys, right? Like their producers read all those websites and look at these news articles and they're like, we can make a segment out of this, right? Like this happened to my boss at the Niskanen Center who had a bad tweet.
Why didn't why didn't the people you work for stand up for you? Why don't they say we're not going to play by your rules, right-wing crazy people? He told a joke, and and of course if they had just let it pass 3 days later, nobody would even remember it. Like why did they put blood in the water so that they can be on the lookout for 10 more victims to do what they did to you for? That's what goes on. I mean, it reminds me of this actress in The Mandalorian who got fired now for something anti-Semitic, which wasn't anti-Semitic at all. Like how does this end? Like what's going on here? And why didn't the people you work for stick up for you?
Well, I can't really speak to that for a number of reasons.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I'm not going to pressure you on it, but I'm asking because I just think corporate America keeps giving in to Twitter like this, and it's just feeding into the problem.
Well, like as a general matter, not talking about my own case.
Yeah,
it's the thing that's really new. I don't think there's like a new or novel spirit of censoriousness that's hanging over our culture like a dark cloud. It's that these platforms are different. The technology is different, right? Like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's like the entire world has been put into a single house that has no walls in it, right? And so you feel like everybody is watching you constantly, right? Like all of us carry around a mini film and audio production studio in our pockets, right? Like there's nothing that you can say that you feel isn't heard, that isn't judged. And that you're in this giant panopticon where everybody can see everything. You can see the wilding hordes taking down your allies and your enemies when it's, to their opportunistic advantage, right? Like, and that sense, I think, of being surveilled, of being watched, of like having to watch your step. I think that's a function of the technology, and I think it's really oppressive, and I think it makes people depressed and is bad for us.
Okay, so can I tell you? Can I tell you what infuriates me about it? And I don't know what I am politically. I guess I'm libertarian, but I guess by today's standards, I'm right wing. Although I don't feel particularly right wing on a lot of things. But anyway, so there's this whole talk about it, and I mean, you wrote an apology where you said I made an error of judgment. It looked like a call for violence, and that hurt me to see you do that because I don't want to make you comment. And I'm like, it didn't look like a call for violence. Nobody sincere could say that looked like a call for violence, and now they have him admitting it, which makes it true in a way, And then so let me just give you examples that I remembered. I looked them up today. So for instance, during the first few days of the BLM riots, I have a business in Manhattan, and I have a building there, and I have my mother-in-law, or my stepmother is staying there alone, and she was scared and boarding up the windows and looking for fire extinguishers, and it was very, very scary. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and of course, I think a day or two later, the governor chastised the mayor for the police not being there for anybody, and in all that, Nicole Hannah-Jones tweets. Violence is when an agent of the state kneels on a man's neck. Destroying property which can be replaced is not violence. To use the same language to describe those two things is not moral. And I listen to that and I say, well, actually, that's a call for violence. When somebody's telling people in the middle of a riot, you know what, if you destroy property, that's not really violence. That actually makes me scared.
Yeah, because you don't know. You break a window,
burn down the
piece
building.
of glass goes through somebody's neck. that person's
And-
dead. What do you, I mean,
well, or just destroy somebody's life. And I'm like, when did burning down somebody's property not count as violence? And she doesn't get chastised for that.
Are you kidding me?
No, not by
She's
the
like,
time.
look,
No, by the time.
Look, I mean, like, I agree with her.
Well, so
and I tweeted about this a bit, and people just dogpiled me like fucking crazy with your position, Noam.
I want to hold on. I'm going to give you. I want to hear where you disagree with me. I honestly just want to give you another example. And then with Sarah Jeong, who got hired by the Times. Prior to that, she tweets out #cancel white people. Oh man, it's kind of sick how much joy I get from being cruel to old white men. And I'm totally fine with her getting hired. I defended her. And I'm like, well. They hired someone after she tweets that, and they're giving this dude a hard time for a clever joke. I don't see any.
I think those are pretty funny tweets, you know.
Yeah. So yeah.
Speaking as a white man.
Yeah. Listen. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that. Well, I think Nicole Hannah-Jones actually is justifying violence, and you want to answer me on that. Sarah Jeong is high. Irony and I don't care what she says. I just don't understand how they can take your one thing and say, oh well, this is actually somebody calling for violence. All of a sudden we get all the subtlety in these other people's tweets, but his tweet, oh my God, I mean, did you hear him call for violence? I'm like, what do you take me for? So go ahead, what's your answer?
Well, I mean, like I don't think there's there really can be a general policy that covers all of these cases, right? Like one of the weird things about social media is it creates like interesting asymmetries in power that didn't exist before between employees and employers, right? Like if you have an employee who has a huge Twitter following, right? Like that's something that the institution is kind of buying. That's valuable if you're something like a newspaper or a think tank. Like if you've got a star journalist who can bring in 100,000 eyeballs every time they write something or every time they like retweet something, that's really valuable to you, so that it gives them a certain kind of like leverage, right. Where like Nicole Hannah-Jones, I mean, like she won a Pulitzer Prize, like she's huge, like
you thought her tweet was okay about property is.
Well, like, and also I think she was right. But the thing is, like,
why do you think she was right?
I'm trained as a philosopher, and there's just a fundamental distinction between people and fucking stuff.
Well, nobody denies.
Right? Like, you could trash a brick, and that's not a person. Like, you haven't hurt anything. It doesn't have nerve endings. Like, that brick might belong to somebody, right? And that's, it ought to be a crime to smash other people's stuff. But it's not. It's different from violence. It's just like a categorically different thing. You haven't harmed a person.
We're watching a movie scene, you and I, of some people in the Deep South go to a black family's home and burn it down. All their possessions destroyed. And you want to tell me that you don't see that scene as a violent? It's not the same thing as killing them. But you don't see that as an outrageous, violent scene in the same way I do. Like you would look at that scene of the white people burning down the black family's home and say, "Oh, come on, what are they all bellyaching about? It's just a home."
No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but that's what her tweet was saying.
No, that's not what her tweet was saying. Like if you burn down somebody's house just because they're black and you don't like black people, that's a real, incredibly intimidating threat to their welfare. Home. You're like, did you know that they weren't in the house? Right? Like I just don't think it's a good example. Right? Like if it's more like if like a bunch of people are having a parade, and people have like a little bit too much to drink, and people get a little excited, and they end up, smashing a window, like.
So Will,
it's property damage.
You must think that Bernie Madoff shouldn't even have gone to jail. I mean, all he took was money. He didn't even burn anybody. All he did.
Like, it doesn't mean it's not wrong. Like, everything doesn't have to be the same crime to be wrong or worthy of punishment.
I would say that when you burn down somebody's home,
Like, you don't think shoplifting is violence, do you?
no, burning down, destroying property is violent. I don't believe.
So you think walking on somebody's lawn is violent?
Well,
Like because you ruined their begonias?
No, I didn't say that.
But they're all violent. But they're different.
No, shoplifting.
Well, whether you want to categorize it as violence or not, Will agrees that it's wrong and a criminal. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think more or less on the same.
Okay, the Merriam-Webster definition of violence is the use of physical force so as to injure, abuse, damage, or destroy. So that's if we're all gonna agree to go by the same dictionary, then it's violence. But what she was saying, which is scary to me, but she obviously should have. Nobody was saying it's the same as killing somebody. What she should have been saying is, like, why is she making the point that it's not so bad to destroy property at a time when people's lives were being ruined? And of course,
it's because people were drawing an equivalence between the propensity of police to disproportionately kill African Americans. They were trying to delegitimize Black Lives Matter protests because windows were getting broken, buildings were getting burned down, and they're trying to say these people are just as bad. This problem is just as serious as historical, violence against African Americans, right? Like, yeah. And she's right; they're not parallel.
Okay,
that's the point she's making.
I don't remember her directly responding to someone who said something to what you're saying. If she did, then I would agree with you. But I don't think that's what it was. What I remember hearing, and by the way, Ilhan Omar at the time spoke very eloquently about stopping the destruction of property. So, it wasn't.
I mean, it's clearly like it's clearly wrong and bad. Like Dan said, like I think it's completely outrageous to trash, somebody's business that they've spent their life
first of all property
right? Like, I just don't think it is the same kind of wrongdoing as ending a human being's life.
Of course it's not, and that's a straw man. Nobody would ever.
No, that's not a straw man. That's literally the comparison
nobody would ever say it was.
And that's exactly what Hannah Jones was pushing back against.
Maybe when we get off the thing, you can email me what you're referring to, because I don't remember hearing.
We should ask her. I think she'd say that I'm right.
But you claim to. I don't remember hearing anybody saying it's the same. I remember people saying that it is not excusable to destroy another person's life because you're angry about a atrocity unrelated to the person you're punishing. And by the way, you can't, just because it's property doesn't actually mean it can be replaced. You may not be able to replace it. You may not have any money to ever be able to replace it.
Sure. And it's awful. And it's clearly self-defeating for protesters to like for the most part, BLM protesters did a good job of policing themselves. They were overwhelmingly peaceful, but in a bunch of places, like riots broke out, like people smashed stuff, and the fact that we're having this debate at all right now shows that they've kind of that undermined the moral force of their cause, which is righteous and good.
Okay, but this is where I think, and we'll move on. This is why I actually think you're incorrect here. Her tweet does not reference any of the things that you say. The tweet complains about the use of the word violence. And she says it's not violence, and she's incorrect by the dictionary definition, which is the only definition I think. If she has a different definition, then how do I argue with her if she doesn't agree that the dictionary?
There's a lot of different dictionaries, and there's more than one. If you read down the page, you'll find.
I don't know if there's any
definition 1, definition 2, definition 3.
I don't think there's a dictionary in the world which will say if you take a sledgehammer through somebody's property, it's not.
Does it matter if we call it violence or not? We're all in accord that it is a criminal act and that it is wrong.
Yeah, so to use the same word to describe both is not moral. Let's move on, because we didn't come here to argue about Nicole Hannah-Jones. It is very interesting, but whatever it is. So for a guy who I think you were treated extremely, extremely unfairly. I don't get it. You seem to be very zen about it in a way. I think the people who are done this to you, every one of them is totally insincere.
Hey, look, like I've been a libertarian most of my life. It's, at will employment is a thing, right? People get fired every freaking day. Like today, there's some woman who got fired because she, turned down her, the night manager's unwanted advance, right? Like that's illegal, but it happens, right? Like, and it can happen because most people don't have any protection, right? Like it's impossible to fire a school teacher or a cop because they have a union that has a contract that governs the terms of their termination. But like for most people in almost any business, right? Like they don't have to have a reason to let you go. And so that's just part of life in the freaking jungle of free market capitalism. And so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna moan about it. Like I'm just gonna move on. And because there's so many people who have it worse than me, that like who experience much greater injustice. I think it's just kind of shitty to act like a martyr as though.
Can I ask a question?
But I want to go ahead quick because I want to move on. We're going to run out of time, and I want to get to the. So go ahead.
Do you think that you did something terrible? Like, why did you apologize? Like, was that just sort of diplomacy? Which no judgment if it was. I'm genuinely curious because to me it seems so obvious that you were being tongue in cheek. Like. Obviously, you weren't fucking seriously suggesting that. Like, it seems insane that, the Times could take that position.
All right, don't put him on the spot because he still has relationships with these people that he needs to try to that are more important to him than our dumb podcast. Okay, but so then you wrote a column which is very interesting about Barry Weiss. Now, full disclosure, I know Barry Weiss. I don't know her well, but I would say that even though I don't know her well, I have a very warm and I think a feeling towards her, and she has in return. So you can judge my objectivity on that. So
I've heard she's a lovely person. I know people who know her who say that she's gracious and kind.
So she wrote a column, 10 Ways to Fight Back Against Woke Culture, and you called her to task. And I'm trying not to cherry pick anything badly here. At the top you said, and you quote Barry, Weiss begins, "I realize the faddish thing to say these days is that we live in the worst, most broken and backward country in the world, and maybe in the history of civilization." And then she wrote, "It's utter nonsense." And you write, "Can it be faddish to say something literally no one says? It cannot." And I stopped and I thought about that. And I said, well, he's right. Almost no one says it, although I did find some quotes, but I don't have the time because we're running out of time. I did find some quotes from some prominent left-wing people that get close to that, but I would say you are right. Nobody actually says that. But then I would say, zooming out, I said, but I know exactly what she's talking about. I understand her point exactly. I don't think she means it literally, just like I understood Will's point about pens. And I thought it was somehow uncharitable for Will to get literal with her when he had just been.
I don't think she's making a joke. When you're making I write newspaper columns, and when you're making an argument in a newspaper column, people are just going to take it at face value. So that's why you are careful in how you say things.
But you don't really think you know what she meant. You don't really think she meant people are literally saying that verbatim. She's saying that. We live at a time.
Why would she say that?
Well, because
it's not funny.
But I think
right, like so it's hyperbole, which is what I said. I think we all just are willing to, allow for a margin of hype.
Okay,
but like she's like she's just overstating something in a way that makes her argument she's just like clearing a path for herself that allows her argument to proceed in a way it wouldn't if she were being careful and actually representing what other people's views are accurately. So what she's just doing is misrepresenting the people that she's arguing against. She's creating a straw man and knocking it down.
Okay,
right? Like
well,
that's what it is. That's what a straw man is.
So
It's like this is a position that people don't hold, and then she knocks it down.
All right, you accuse of hyperbole, and I want to confess, I'm liking you very much as a guest, so I'm losing my nerve actually to call you out on what I want to call you out on, but I'm going to call you on this one thing, and then we can
go for it.
Impeachment or whatever it is. So then on the charge of hyperbole, then later on you write, American democracy very recently failed the peaceful transfer of power test. And I'm thinking, failed the peaceful transfer of power test? I know we had that violent protest, but my vision of what failing the peaceful transfer of power test would be having no transfer of power, or having the people involved in the transfer of power involved in the violence. And I even did some research on it. You know, there's like, where is it? Did I forget? It was like 67 countries in the world that have never had a peaceful transfer of power. Russia's never had a peaceful transfer of power. China's not having it, has never had a peaceful transfer of power. If the people who stormed the Capitol still were in the Capitol today, we would still have transferred power. They never actually implicated power. So I'm like, well, that seems like hyperbole. And then the next line
is not hyperbole, it's just literally true.
Well,
what that means, like, political theory is my field, and the peaceful transfer of power means that you pass from like one government to another, one administration to another, without any violence that is attempting to impede that handover. This was literally violence. These people attacked the fucking US Congress at the moment that they were certifying the election because they thought it was stolen.
Okay,
they succeeded in
hold on.
scattering the Congress and delaying the certification of it. Like, that's exactly what the failure of a peaceful transfer of power looks like.
Tell me this with your political theory. Can you give me an example of another failure of the peaceful transfer of power where the two parties involved in the peaceful transfer of power had no part and had never any intention ever of being persuaded by the violence? In other words, the people, the baton of power, neither side was going to be persuaded by these rioters who got into the Capitol. So you need one of the parties involved in the transfer of power to somehow be in cahoots with the violence. There was no.
How many House Republicans voted against the certification? How many House Republicans voted against the certification of the election?
But that's not violence. That's not violence.
Right, but like that is what they're doing is making a vote that is based on the lie that they know precipitated the violence. Right, like they're complicit in it.
If we failed the peaceful transfer of power, what's going on in Russia? What did Putin do? We just get the same grade as Putin? I mean, like of course there's like it's hyperbole.
No, it's not. It's not hyperbole. It's just freaking literally true. I don't know why you're trying to deny it. Like Congress was attacked while it was trying to validate the results of a legitimate election. Right. That means the transfer of power was not peaceful. People died.
It was peaceful.
People died.
Say it was peaceful.
Right, and the reason that people died is because a bunch of Republicans were trying to make it so that Joe Biden couldn't become president.
I'm not
like
saying
that's what it was. So you just couldn't be more wrong. And there's nothing like in the least that's hyperbole about what I said.
I'm not.
I can refer you to a bunch of political scientists who study comparative politics around the world, and they'll tell you this is an example. Like the reason it's an outrage is that this has never happened in the United States of America, even during like the freaking Civil War, right? Like it's never happened. That's why it's so shameful. It's why it's such a black mark on our history, right? Like it's never happened here before. Like we did have something to be proud of, and so like, but you're trying to come up with something that you think is like, like a whataboutism thing where like I did the same thing that Weiss did, but I didn't. Well, this is a legitimate reason for people to be disappointed in their country.
Yes, absolutely. But somewhere between that and failing, not a B, not a C, not a D, not blemished, But a failure, to me,
it's binary. You either did it or you didn't.
well,
And we
if you
didn't.
want to me,
Like you don't get a C.
to me,
There's no C
to
grade
me,
in the peaceful transfer of
to
power.
me, if the Republicans actually made their way back to the Capitol or wherever they met quickly to make sure that the transfer of power went on, despite the fact that these guys and their horns and these monsters tried to interfere with it, but both the Republicans and the Democrats,
Republican Trump supporters.
yes, Republican Trump supporters, but the Republicans and the Democrats both were very highly responsible in making sure that this, let's be honest, symbolic act of transfer here, it didn't matter if it didn't even occur, went on, is not a failure of transfer of power. So, for instance, when you read another political scientist, it says
It's a necessary condition constitutionally. Like that, it has to be done. Like if they don't do it, the guy isn't president, right? Like it is usually ceremonial, like because it's considered a formality, but it's a formality that has to be accomplished.
Okay,
So if you could defer it indefinitely, it would in fact prevent the guy from taking power.
I'll read historical fact. 2008. As of 2008, 68 countries, including 2 elephants, China and Russia, have never experienced a peaceful transfer of power between parties as a result of an election. If you want to tell me that those 68 countries failed the peaceful transfer of power and America also failed the peaceful transfer of power, I would say that's not helpful to understanding what it means to fail the peaceful transfer of power. The next thing you say, though, and I think you'll have a hard
I don't know why you're reaching on this.
Okay,
You should
that's
just admit that you're wrong.
Okay,
right?
I'll
Like,
admit that I'm
and the
wrong.
whole point is the whole point
Will, let me
is
go to the
that
next
countries are countries. The way politics works is like human beings are human beings. Like we've got a system that's like, my point in this thing is that yeah, we're the 17th freest country in the world. That's great. Like
Will.
But like it doesn't mean that we're the best.
Please.
It doesn't mean that we're exceptional.
Okay.
Right? It means that we're like worse than Canada.
Okay. Next line after that, you say, and 447,000 Americans have perished in an easily preventable viral infection. Now, that seems to me as totally hyperbolic. If it was easily preventable, why haven't the Germans prevented it? Why haven't the Italians prevented it? Like, what secret do you have that makes are you saying that
how many people have died in New Zealand? No. How many people have died in Australia? How many people have died in Taiwan? How many people have died in Vietnam? It's a much poorer country.
So you're saying
their
that
death rate as a proportion of their population is just a tiny fraction of ours.
Are you saying that when you have a curve from very good to very bad, therefore that means that it was easy? Because of course, we can go to New Zealand being an island and a tiny country, and
you know
Taiwan.
what? Like they're implementing, like before Trump, we had the world's best public health bureaucracy.
Are you
like
saying
the
that
plan for pandemic
incredible
response that the countries that have succeeded really well is based on the American plans that Trump inherited, right? We couldn't have stopped it completely.
Germany can't prevent. Germany has a higher per capita death rate currently than we do. How come they can't prevent the easily preventable infection? How come so many countries have not been? If it's not hyperbolic to say COVID is easily preventable, I don't know what to say. I mean,
it's easy to prevent getting it, isn't it?
I don't know.
I barely left my house.
New Zealand, it is
right. Like and places that had that did dramatic shutdowns early, that closed borders and international travel, that had people very uniformly wearing masks when they did go out, who implemented big testing, tracing, and supported isolation programs like we should have had, which is what the plan was that was completely ignored. Those places have done quite well. But we didn't do that, right? Like we just didn't. Trump wanted to say that it wasn't a problem because he thought conceding that it was a big deal would make him look bad. He thought it would spook the markets, and he thinks that the markets are like a barometer of his success. And so he didn't want to concede that it was a problem. But once it got to be a big problem, like he had to stick with the lie. And I worked on this. I was working on pandemic response policy. I with members of Congress. It was outrageous.
Will, I'm not defending Trump's policies on COVID one way or another, nor Cuomo's, nor anybody who's got their fingerprints on this thing. What I'm saying is that to describe COVID as easily preventable, well, I guess you mean that France, Italy, Germany, Russia, all the countries that have been hit hard with COVID are a bunch of idiots because this was easily preventable. What I'm saying is that's a hyperbolic statement. That's hyperbole. It's not easily preventable. We made some mistakes, but it was a difficult challenge that we failed to meet. It wasn't an easy challenge. It wasn't a just swatted away challenge that we're the only one in the world who couldn't manage this. This was a very, very hard challenge, a very difficult.
No, I mean that, like the politics of it were forbidding. That's why it didn't happen.
You want to stand by the fact that COVID is easily preventable, easily preventable viral infection. It's easy to not get it, and it's easy to wipe out if you do in a community if you do the right thing before it hits a certain stage of fixation.
I think one has to distinguish
the right thing. Go ahead, Dan.
I think one has to distinguish between politically easily preventable and logistically easily preventable. Perhaps it was easily preventable if we could had perfect foresight and were able to act.
If we implemented the plan that we already had.
It was not preventable.
But politically, for someone to have said in January, when even Dr. Fauci said we probably don't have to worry about this, to shut everything down would have been impossible.
I think it was always going to be a big problem in New York, the big ports of entry, right? Like there was going to be a bunch of people that were going to die because that's how you realize it's a huge big deal, right? Like the alarm has to go off first, right? But there's no reason it needed to, become a huge problem in my state, in Iowa, right? Like, because it takes a while for, a big, set of infections to migrate to different parts of the country as people travel. And if various places had been doing the right thing and there was a coordinated response, like the deaths could have been really severely curtailed, and it would have been worse in New York, in Seattle, where like these international ports of entry where it came in first. There would have been no kind of preventing that in the first instance, but we really could have easily gotten on top of it because we knew what to do. We have more resources than basically any country in the world to do it. We had the world's premier public health agency, and it was utterly botched for basically vanity.
Well, then, okay, if we botched it for vanity, then what's England's excuse? Because they have a higher death rate than we do.
Same thing.
It wasn't easily preventable. Listen, Trump was terrible. Cuomo was terrible. And as a matter of fact, the New York Times had said that what was the number? A third or more than a third of all the cases could have been prevented back then if Cuomo had acted sooner. Now we have the nursing home thing. Trump and his
he fucked up royally,
and
man.
This Trump with this ridiculous thing against masks and free Michigan and you're right, and the vanity and all the mess. But in the end, if you look at the entire world, and New Zealand, I think, is a very bad. I think that calling New Zealand as an example undermines the credibility of your case. We have to choose comparable countries. I think that
they're not comparable if they're a counterexample. It's a very culturally similar country. It's got a very similar level of wealth and technological competency. They speak the same language. I mean, why is it not comparable?
Canada,
New Zealand, Australia.
Well, no, New Zealand and Australia are not comparable because they're island nations, also different climate. There's density issues.
It's very. It's easy.
You see what you've done here.
Why is it harder for no?
You drag me into a conversation about COVID, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. And you could enumerate.
I wrote a piece for this about this.
I'm saying it's not easily to say that COVID was easily preventable. is hyperbole. I know what you're saying. I get your point. I probably wouldn't have rolled my eyes at it if I read it, because
I don't think it's hyperbole. I mean it literally.
All right. Well, okay. It's not. Well,
I mean, you could say that you think it's not true, which clearly you don't. So we have a disagreement about its truth or falsity. I think it's literally true.
What did you mean? So you think we could have had the last year without COVID spreading? California can't even prevent COVID going around.
Yes, I will. If people are interested, I wrote a piece for the Niskanen Center when I was employed there called Trump's COVID-19 Culpability, and I kind of go through. I spent months. It actually sent me into a depression working with people who were doing pandemic response policy. Like we were trying to get the federal government to do the things that, it's a regular handbook for pandemic response said to do, which is massive testing, contact tracing, and supported isolation. That means like once the contact tracers have gone through, they've identified the people who are infected, you need to support the people who you've identified as positive cases. You have to make sure that they have enough to eat, that they can pay the rent and stuff like that, or else they're going to continue to go to work and spread the virus, right? Like it's just proven to work. It's worked over and over again with different viruses, and this one in particular in a pretty wide array of places.
Okay, but then the final thing that we should go on to something that we can agree about. But then the final thing you say is that, and this is where I think really I
didn't know I was coming on to argue with my libertarian uncle.
Well, it's okay. But then the final thing you say, so easily preventable infection. Easily preventable viral infection and uncontrolled pandemic, which has caused the largest contraction in the U.S. economy since 1946. And at that point, I said, no. Now he's just being unfair, because if it was easily preventable in the way that I believe you thought it should have been prevented, of course the economy was going to contract. You can't at the same time complain that we didn't prevent the infection, and also, by the way, complain about the economy contracting, because I presume if we had locked down and taken all the measures that you think we should have, the economy was going to contract just as much, if not more. No,
it would have contracted just a tiny fraction as much. Like the reason you do
be able to go to work.
The reason you do the hard shutdowns first is so you can identify the positive cases, you do the contact tracing, you isolate the people who are positive, then the rate of infection goes down below the point at which the virus is reproducing, and then it's more or less gone. Then you can open everything up. People still wear masks, they still distance, but that's why the economy in the places that did the thing that we already knew how to do are doing fine.
I'll get Dan. I have not many people argue this. And listen, maybe you are right. And I'm not saying that condescendingly or snarkily. Maybe you're right. But just to be clear, your position is that we could have prevented the infection and also kept the economy booming. I find that wow. I mean, I haven't heard many people say that.
We could have limited it to maybe 150,000 deaths, which is a big deal. Like not having another 300,000 or 400,000 people dying. Of course, there was going to be some economic contraction because you have to put
a huge economic contraction because everybody's afraid. Nobody's gonna.
No, but it wouldn't have lasted as long, right? Like people
it'll come right back.
No, it doesn't come right back.
Yeah, because people are not wearing their masks. Look at California.
No, people wear that. That's the thing, and this is part of the problem.
The virus spread during the lockdowns.
This is insufferable.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right, you don't know what you're talking about. I do this for a living. It's just driving me nuts.
Do you think Canada did a good job? Because Canada, they have a lot less deaths, but they still have a pretty robust, number.
They've done a much, much, much better job.
They've done a much better job. But had we done the job that they had done, would you have found that satisfactory? Or would you still say
no? I wouldn't find it satisfactory because it's not satisfactory to fail to do things that you know how to do that get people killed, right? Like it's hard, no doubt. Good government administration is difficult. People are recalcitrant. like Trump created huge problems in denying that it was a problem, like in politicizing mask wearing, right? Like that persists to this day. People are still dying because Donald Trump didn't want to wear a mask. And so much of it is directly his fault. And that attitude spilled over to other countries. It spilled over to Canada. They have their conservatives are very similar to ours. And this became a thing. As it's a symbol of our freedom from the oppression of officious government bureaucrats, right? Like to go around spreading a viral infection that's going to kill somebody's grandma, right? Like
I don't like what you said, that you do this for a living. I don't think
I used to.
Well, I'll tell you why I don't like it. Because there are people with PhDs in
because I'm pulling rank on you. Like nobody likes that. But well,
let me tell you.
But I get to, because I study this stuff.
Okay, there are people with PhDs who study this stuff who agree with me, and there are people with PhDs who study this stuff who agree with you. What I'm saying is not the opinion which is only held by ignorant people. I've heard enough important doctors, people who could pull rank on you, who have said that the virus was going to find its way one way or another. And I have evidence on my side, which is major European nations, which have had serious contractions in their economy and have been unable to control the virus. Even nations which have more obedient and more kind of like a culture of more obedience than we do here. We have far liberal states with terrible records. We have conservative states with terrible records. We have states where they've been in lockdown and required masks.
Like all of the efforts at the state level were undermined from the beginning. They were actively
not in
undermined.
Germany, not in England, not in Italy.
In England, yes. Italy got it early in a really, really bad way. But their governance has never been especially strong, right? Like, it's just like, it's fine. We could just move past it, but like we disagree. That's the point, is that we disagree, right? Like, but you're not going to get me like you're doing the same thing that Barry Weiss is, because I'm not. I'm saying what I think. You think it's wrong.
Yeah, I know it's fine. I find it's nice to disagree, and I'm taking everything. If you could be inside my head as you're saying things, I'm actually thinking about what you're saying and rechecking my arithmetic. The only thing I take issue with, and I have to be honest, I don't like it, is this somehow pulling rank as if we were arguing about arithmetic, and you're like, listen, you're gonna have to take my word for it. 2 + 2 is 4.
But this is what I'm saying. I was working for months. I was working for no. I'm saying I was working for months.
Yeah, but
with epidemiologists at Harvard, talking to members of Congress, right? Like, like the brand name puts you off. Like I'm just saying, like, people, like very, very eminent epidemiologists, public health officials, trying to coordinate a response and get members of U.S. Congress, Republicans, to take it seriously, so that so many people wouldn't die.
Look,
right, and so like that's what I'm saying. Like in the pulling rank, I devoted months of my life and drove myself into a depression, because it was so clear what could have been done, and to see the utter neglect and just like the contempt of a lot of our elected officials for any action that really just absolutely positively would have saved thousands of people's lives, right? Like, that just drove me into like despair. Like, I didn't know what to do.
I'm shaped by the following experience I had, which was early on during COVID, when I was telling everybody they should close the schools, including in New York. And I was called a fearmonger, and people were telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. People were telling me to trust the doctors. Then later on, I had done a lot of research, and I was on this show saying we need to have masks. Everybody needs to wear a mask. I even went and we had doctors on and who said,
yeah.
and said, no, you don't know. And they pulled rank. Well, I'm a Harvard, blah, blah, blah. Masks are not the answer, blah, blah, blah. So I've seen this go around. The point is that, as I said, at a time when I can find you experts, all equally credentialed, who have varying opinions on this, it seems to me it is no longer a subject where you can pull rank.
I'm just telling you that there's an overwhelming consensus in the field. You can always find people who are out of the
norm.
norm.
Defeated COVID and not contracted the economy. Well, after we get up, then email me something.
They're experts perhaps in epidemiology, but maybe not experts in politics. So that, as I said before, it might have been doable, but politically it might not have been doable. Politically, it might not have been easy. And of course, you have to recognize that there's a problem, which is hard to do, and not everybody did. But
we were neck and neck with Europe for a long, long time. It goes up, goes down. I don't see. Anyway, so do you want to talk about impeachment at all? We have never talked about it. I know we're basically out of time.
Well, we're sort of out of time, Noam.
But what's your attitude on impeachment, Will?
It's good.
I have some questions about it, which I didn't watch any of it, but I have some questions that trouble me on it. Maybe you have an opinion on them. Maybe anybody has an opinion on them. So just for the record, I think that when Pence wrote a letter to Pelosi saying that, he actually put it in writing, that Trump, I forget the word he used, but essentially Trump tried to get him to exceed his constitutional authority on the matter of the election. I think that was case closed in terms of being an impeachable offense. It seemed like precisely the kind of offense that the framers would have had in mind. If the president is trying to get the vice president to ignore fair and free elections, that seems to me easy. But that's not what they charged him with. So my first question to the world is, do the articles of impeachment matter? Are we supposed to read the articles of impeachment and determine whether or not those articles have been proven? Or are they just a placeholder for a general anti-Trump trial where we can bring in anything we want? What you have an opinion about that, anybody?
Well, I mean, the article was for incitement of insurrection.
Right. Now, do we have to prove incitement of insurrection to support the
impeachment is a completely political process. It's not a judicial proceeding. There are no standards of evidence in the way that there are in courts. Like, that's why Trump was acquitted. There were just more,
but that answers my question, though. And it's an important question in my mind, analytically. Do they need to prove the articles of impeachment as they've written it? Or can they just prove other stuff and convict him? Because I think
they focused really narrowly. I mean, they wrote about incitement of insurrection, and that's what they spent the entire trial trying to establish.
Now, do they have to define incitement?
Yeah, I mean, they
They
have to. But like the thing is, like, the process is about getting votes from senators, right? And there isn't like jury instructions. Each senator can create their own criteria for the standard on which they're going to vote, right? Like, they take an oath and they kind of make a pledge, but like there's no like mistrial, right? There's no way that they can deliberate in a way that makes the proceedings illegitimate. It's just whatever they decide is what happens, right? Like, so when they raised the question of whether it's constitutional to impeach or convict a president after they've been out of office, right? The answer to that question is constituted by the votes of the Senate, right? Like, it's non-judiciable in the sense that, like, the Supreme Court cannot rule on it. It won't. That's a fundamental part of the separation of powers, because this is the fundamental power of Congress, right? Like, so whether or not it's constitutional for them to do it just depends on what the Senate decides, right? The Senate decided that it is because they had the votes for that.
What I'm getting at is this, and I won't pull rank. You're not a lawyer, right?
No.
I won't pull rank and dismiss whatever you have to say because you're not a lawyer and I am.
Go for it. If I've got it coming, do it.
What I'm saying is that they charge him with incitement, and I understand incitement as having a definition which includes intent, and trying to force myself to be disinterested here. I would say, well, no, they didn't improve incitement. I'll give you a very shorthand reason why. It seems to me that we would have seen in real time people tweeting during Trump's speech he's inciting violence. Like, if it was clear that this was incitement to violence, why people, as they were listening to it, would have recognized it and tweeted about it, as they so often do. To say after the fact,
I think
this is incitement because somebody was violent, say, well, okay, but to be incitement to violence, you ought to be able to judge it without knowing how it turned out. It's not incitement to violence because somebody committed violence. If I say, I want you to go out now, take these guns and shoot everybody down, that's incitement to violence. If you don't do it, it was still incitement to violence. And if I said something like, I want you to fight like hell, and you go punch somebody in the nose, that's not incitement to violence because you were violent. And I
think that's a fair point, but I also think people in general knew that Trump was playing a dangerous game, whether it meets the legal definition of incitement, just like we knew.
That's right.
We knew he was playing a dangerous game and that violence was possible.
But Dan, you're bringing back my first point. That's right. But the question is, in my mind, they keep coming back to it's fine. Do the articles of impeachment matter? Because they didn't say that in the articles of impeachment. They say the January 6th speech. And by the way, we know that a lot of the violence.
They didn't say what. My previous point was that they don't have to prove incitement according to any legal standard that's external to whatever it is that.
What are the articles of impeachment for?
The articles of impeachment are they're for impeaching the president. The House delivers them to the Senate, and when they do, it becomes mandatory for the Senate to have a trial. That's what they're for. And the trial is a trial that that's going to make a decision about the guilt. They're gonna convict or acquit the president relative to the articles. But the thing is, they could the articles of impeachment, maybe this is what you're saying, that the articles of impeachment, if you get enough members of the House to say it, you'd be like, Trump once kicked the dog. And maybe he never did. It's just they're just lying about it and say Trump kicked the dog, he shouldn't be president, right? If you get enough of them to do it, they put the articles together and send them over to the Senate. The Senate has to have a trial. And if there are enough senators who say, yeah, I agree, he kicked the dog, he shouldn't be president, they can convict. He's not president anymore, and there's no recourse. That's the end of the story.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying if I had to decide whether I was going to vote to impeach.
So in that sense, the articles don't matter. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I find that to be very difficult to accept, that especially if Justice Roberts were presiding over a trial, that we would have this proceeding with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the articles, the indictment, as it were, are actually meaningless. So when they write at the end, I brought it up, that he has demonstrated, this is the final paragraph, he has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security, democracy, and constitution if allowed to remain in office. And I'm like, well, but he's not in office anymore. So that kind of undercuts the case. If that's the reason, well, then no. I think they botched this.
Well, they wrote the articles of impeachment before he was out of office.
But they knew he was going to be out of office by the time.
No, they didn't. Mitch McConnell slow-walked it so that the Senate trial would occur after he was out of office, so that Republicans could say there's a constitutional problem with doing it after he's out of office.
You're right.
They easily could have done it while he was in office, but they chose not to give themselves cover.
Pelosi took the weekend to deliver it, and it's McConnell actually, really, to his discredit, I compared it to the old joke about the guy who kills his mother and father and then pleads for mercy as an orphan. He says that McConnell's like, well, we didn't have time. Well, you didn't. Of course, you didn't have time because you didn't call the Senate back into session.
Took a 3-day weekend.
Yeah. So I agree with you. But nevertheless, they weren't going to have time. They could have started the trial, but they weren't going to have time, I don't think, to finish it. It just seems like
they could do it in a day. I mean, there's also no constraints on how fast you go.
Well, if you had been in the room, wouldn't you have said, listen, guys, let's put a paragraph in there. There's a good chance we might not be through this before he's out. He's only 5 days away or 7 days away. Maybe we should put a paragraph in there which doesn't rest the whole thing on getting him out of office, when there's a good chance we might be arguing this when he's already out of office. It's just maybe we should mention. I started with, maybe we should mention that he pressured the vice president to exceed his constitutional authority on the matter of fair and free elections. And by the way, the vice president put that in writing, so we have actual evidence of it. Like we have evidence that can be put into the record. No. Let's just call it incitement, which is a crime which has always required intent. And then we're going to not be able to prove that.
I'm just telling you that like it's not a legal standard. Like they don't have to prove anything. They just have to agree and vote or disagree and vote against it. And like and just like the vote count is dispositive. That just settles the issue.
Yeah, but just because they don't have to doesn't mean it wouldn't be extremely smart to
well,
do
you know,
it.
like I thought they could, but like I thought it was like an open and shut case. I thought the House managers just absolutely fucking killed it. I think that they established, like, even if you are using a criminal standard, I think they established incitement beyond a shadow of a doubt. If I was a juror,
that he intended to have the violence?
Yes, absolutely.
And how did they? I didn't watch it. How did they establish?
Like, they did a great job of like piecing together the whole thing. Like he was spending months grooming his followers to consider any result other than his victory illegitimate.
Yeah.
He was he was, you know,
That's an assignment of violence.
Let me ask you this. Well, what?
No.
Go ahead, Dan.
What if he actually believed that there was illegitimate, that the election was illegitimate? Does he have a right to speak about it? And then would it be incitement in that case?
And they attach the incitement for the most part. It's a little. I don't want to be unfair. There is some other language in there, but for the most part, predominantly, I think I'm being fair in saying that they attach the incitement to the speech of January 6th, which is seriously undercut by all the evidence that's come out.
I mean,
since
like,
then,
did you see
that it was pre-planned, that the violence was already planned?
Did you see the bit where like Mike Lee just like freaked out because like Trump accidentally called him twice? And he was trying to get, you know, that like hayseed football coach from Alabama, what's the guy's, Tommy Tuberville or something? Like, and so like while the insurrection is going on, he calls.
And he says,
right?
What?
Like this is part of the case for intent, right? Like, and he's like, what's going on? And like, you know, they tell him, and he's like, like, what's up with Pence? Like he's hiding. And like, he's kind of like, good. Right? Like that was the gist of it. And he sends no help. He tweets nothing. He doesn't say anything to condemn the violence while it's going on. He actively refrains from mobilizing federal forces that could have protected the Capitol. Like all of those actions together, like add up to something. To it's pretty clear that he wanted it to happen.
I wouldn't say so, but I respect your opinion. I don't think that that's the definition of incitement. I think that.
Well, the case that everybody.
Let me put it another way. I think if Trump had never given a speech, and exactly the same thing had transpired, he would have been just as happy to see it happen, and he would have done exactly the same thing. He would have let Pence doing it. I don't think that the speech.
But it wouldn't have transpired. Like he organized this thing, and he was like. He was whipping people up into a frenzy before it happened. He's telling them to get there. It's called Stop the Steal. Like, how are they going to stop it? Right? Like he tells them that they have to fight like 20 times. Like he tells them that like their, sort of democratic rights and liberties are being stolen from them, that their votes have been invalidated, that the government is about to install an illegitimate government, and we have to stop it before it's too late. Like,
so Will, is my point
like,
stupid?
What did he want?
No, is my point stupid? I'm going to say my point again because maybe it is stupid. Maybe I'm missing something. Wouldn't it be the case that people, the Trump haters, watching that speech of January 6th, if this was so clear, would have been tweeting out, "This is incitement to violence. Listen to what he's saying. He's calling for violence. When he says, we're going to go there peacefully and patriotically, you're going to fight like hell, blah, blah." This is all generic protest language that we've heard a million times before. That's why I think nobody...
I don't know. Like when Rudy Giuliani gets up and says it's like trial by combat, like I don't like. I don't know.
No,
As a trial by
see that's part of the. Now that's actually I'm not going to accuse you of doing that on purpose. But if you go back and look at that quote, he actually is referring to legal combat. He's literally, I will eat my shirt if you look it up and say I was not being straight with you here. I looked up that quote. He was referring to legal combat.
I'll believe you. Like, but the thing is, like, I'm not sure what it matters. Like clearly you wouldn't have voted to convict him.
Who, me?
If you were a senator.
But
it's not a question. But it's not a question.
Questions. I would say, do they have to prove the articles?
They don't have to prove the articles. We've already established that. Nothing needs to be proven. People can vote however they want to vote. I'm sure, I'm positive, like I've heard from people who know that a bunch of those Republican senators think he's guilty as hell, but they're terrified of getting primaried by like a MAGA guy. And so they voted against their conscience for completely political reasons. And the thing is, that's completely within their discretion. I think it's morally and politically outrageous, but they didn't do anything illegal. Like, they have no actual obligation to vote according to what they actually think, right? Like that is actionable or that they can be sanctioned for if they feel like there isn't, right? Like, so it's a political process, right? Like, it's supposed to be a political process. It's not a judicial proceeding. It's about like whether enough representatives of the U.S. people think that this person, for whatever reason, is unfit to continue serving in office, or in this case, shouldn't be allowed to hold office again. That's it. That's all it is.
I find it.
It's not Judge Wapner. Like, it's just not a court proceeding.
I find it difficult to internalize the idea that there is a carefully worded accusation, and then that carefully worded accusation is actually not relevant to whether we convict him.
It ought to be relevant, right? Like, and the thing is, like, these things are governed by norms, right? Like you can't write a constitution. This is part of the problem. This is one of the reasons Trump was dangerous. Is that, like, there's a lot of gaps in between, anytime you try to write down a set of procedures that any deliberative body is going to go through, right? Like, a lot of questions come up that the text doesn't answer. There are a lot of gaps. There are a lot of things that you just have to agree that we're going to do this way, or else the whole thing doesn't work, right? And Trump was constantly pushing on every one of those points in which there wasn't a literal legal requirement, and doing everything that he had the legal discretion to do, even if it was totally destructive to the norms that make the system actually work, right? Like, that's one of the main reasons he was dangerous. There's again, like this, it's a norm, it's a convention that the joint session of Congress, in which Congress votes to, accept the electors' votes, that it's just considered to be a formality, and it's considered to be a huge breach of protocol to refuse, right? Like to do it, like or to try to override the electors' votes or to protest them, because that undermines the legitimacy of the person who comes in next, right? Like, and that hurts the system. That makes it work worse, right? Like, so a bunch of Republicans violated this norm when they did that, but like, they didn't do anything illegal. It's totally within their discretion. But that's the kind of Trumpist practice of pushing absolutely everything to the limit and trashing the norms that have made our system work as well as it has. That has made it the case that until now, we've always had a peaceful transfer of power because they heed these conventions, but they stopped doing it.
Yeah. All right. I don't totally disagree with you, but I feel like we're on the path to allowing. I think what I'm saying, my urge to want to keep things within certain bounds is, I think, wise. I think that impeachment is morphing into basically a recall vote of no confidence, where you just have a trial, and as long as you can get the votes, it doesn't even matter what you're charged with.
But did you watch the Senate trial?
No.
Like the thing is, the House managers did exactly what you want them to do. They accepted the Republicans are want to cast the whole thing as a judicial proceeding because the standard of evidence is so high, right? That's like a challenge for the Democrats, and if they can get that framing in place, it makes it harder. The Democrats I think they accepted the framing. They treated it like a trial. They had some brilliant lawyers, and they fucking killed it on very specifically the language of the articles of impeachment, right? Like, so it felt very much like a trial, and they did a great job, and they kept it narrowly tailored to proving the case set forth in the articles.
Okay, I think you're overselling this idea that it's not a trial. I think that if
it is. I mean, it's literally a trial. But it's not. But it happens in the legislative branch of government, which operates according to completely different.
It talks about high crimes and misdemeanors. It talks about being presided over by the.
But there doesn't need to be something that's in any criminal code.
Chief Justice of the Supreme
Court. It's if they decide it's a high crime.
It doesn't need. What I'm saying is that when we saying, well, it's expedient here, let's just ignore that we didn't write this very precisely. Let's just ignore that we're going to have a meaning for incitement that doesn't exist, such that we could accuse him of stealing, but he wouldn't even have to really.
I don't know how you're saying this if you didn't watch it, because they did exactly what you think they ought to be doing, and are criticizing them for not doing. It's exactly what they did. So you should be praising them.
I don't think
they did a great job of doing exactly conducting the trial in exactly the way you want.
From what I read, they did not present evidence either on the plain words he spoke or by some other factual. I don't think there were any witnesses at all to indicate that Trump's intention was to incite a raid on
just go back and watch it. It's incredibly persuasive.
What I heard,
they make a case directly for his intention to.
What I heard what people saying is that, well, we don't require intent here. I think I heard maybe people making the argument that intention is not required here. I'm like, well, that to me is shaky ground, because you likened it to a jury instruction. Well, if you're going to have 100 jurors and you're going to allow them to each have a separate definition of what the crime is, how can you fault anybody for what their verdict was? I think.
But that's literally the case. It's not again, the incitement insurrection. It's not. There is no crime in a criminal code.
What I'm saying is, why not
that defines that crime, or what standards have to be met to prove that it's been done.
Why not
whether or not it's been done?
Why not charge him with something that's not so ambiguous? He urged the vice president to exceed his constitutional authority. That's it. Open and shut, as far as I'm concerned. Did you do that?
But that's not as bad as actually summoning a mob to attack Congress while they're certifying the election.
It may not be
that's a much more sensational crime, and the House managers
hold on, they
press their case in exactly the way you're asking for. So I have no idea what we're even talking about.
Will, it's not about what's bad. It's about what you can prove. They got Capone on racketeering. They didn't get him for what he did that was worse. But if they charged him for the stuff that was worse, he might have got off.
They knew they weren't going to get the votes, right? So they wanted to do the trial in public on the worst thing that he did, right? They still wanted to indict him in the public's mind, and they
could have had both.
They weren't going to get a conviction if they would have picked something with a lower bar. They just weren't gonna. Republicans weren't going to vote for it for completely political reasons.
Is your position here that they didn't make a mistake by not including in there the fact that he asked Pence to exceed his constitutional authority? You don't think that was a mistake?
I think it was a good idea to keep it simple and focus it on one thing that was the most egregious thing that he's done, because it is in fact one of the most egregious things any American president has ever done. And they're doing this in part for political reasons, because they know that Republicans weren't going to convict for political reasons.
Well, the article.
So they're going to show
I'm going to accuse
the
you now of
sensational
I'm gonna
crime,
accuse
make
you
this
now-
ironclad case, and then when Republicans basically violate their oaths
Yeah.
to vote against conviction, they're going to hang it around their necks in
Okay, I'm gonna
2022. And Mitch McConnell's terrified of that.
I'm going to accuse you now of partisanship on that one because I think it's obvious in retrospect they should have also accused him of exceeding his constitutional authority because Pence put it in writing. There's no way that.
But why should they? What would it get them?
Because I'll tell you why they should have. Because incitement requires intent, and intent is quite. And when you have language.
But do you disagree that that there weren't going to be enough Republican votes to convict no matter what? Do you agree with that?
No, you're probably right about that. But
so that's it. So it didn't matter which thing they picked. They didn't matter if they picked an easier to prove thing.
The Nixon impeachment articles listed multiple counts.
The first impeachment, had three.
Hold on. I think you're probably right about that, but I don't know that you're right. I don't know.
They knew that they had limited time. They weren't going to be able to adjudicate a bunch of different issues.
Will, I don't know what it would mean to call Mike Pence to the stand and have him recount how the president tried to get him to violate their trust as vice president on the most sacred duty of fair and free elections. Maybe the Republicans would have still, exactly the same number of Republicans would have voted to acquit, but maybe not. Maybe not. And certainly the country, seeing that dramatic testimony, that would be helpful to see a witness call tape. What did Trump do?
I would have liked to have seen witnesses, but I understand
to say that it was wise not to get that. I would say you're just reflexively defending the party.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying strategically, I think it was a good idea. Politically, like there's something that's incredibly viscerally outrageous about what happened.
Yes, of course.
And that instructing Pence to violate his constitutional duty just doesn't have the same just visceral oh my God, what they did this, right? And so they're making a choice to put that out in front of the American public and to force a bunch of Republican senators to say that it was okay. That's what they were doing. And they're going to run on that like freaking crazy in 2022 because their margin is razor thin.
Okay. Let's wrap this up. But I got to tell you something. If you put a gun to my head and said to me, if Trump had used exactly, if a BLM speaker after George Floyd had used exactly the same language as Trump used, exactly the same language, and say we're going to file and riled the crowd up, and then somebody in that crowd went and shot a cop, which something like that kind of happened a few years ago. I would say he was playing with fire. Maybe it was reckless, but that's not incitement to violence. It's not what I don't know. That's what he wanted. What's underneath all this is the fact that we know Trump was lying here. We know just how ignoble his how phony he was. But I don't know that that's part of the accusation of incitement. Incitement, as I understand it, is trying to get people to go out and commit violence. I think Trump was just being same old Trump. He got enamored with his own ability to dance between the raindrops, and somehow he always manages to avoid the worst. And he thought he could say all this, and they would go out there and put tremendous political pressure on Congress and cause a scene. And he didn't think they were going to kill anybody, nor did he want them to. Certainly no proof that his intention was to see them go kill anybody, and that he behaved terribly when he saw it happening. Absolutely right. But he would have done that. Anybody who committed any kind of atrocious act in his behalf, Trump would always shut up and let it happen. So if you put a gun to my head and say, well, did they prove incitement? I would have to say, no, they didn't. I want to say they did because I know.
Would you maybe watch the trial first?
I would like to go watch the trial, but I read a lot about it. But I do know that incitement someone ought to be able to point to the words on the page and say, read that. Go, look at his speech. Don't you see he's calling those people out to commit violence? And again, I keep going back to, well, it's easy in retrospect, but at the time, if it's so clearly incitement, how come nobody listened to it and said, whoa, stop this guy. He's inciting violence.
Well, I do know that the Brandenburg case, I believe it's called, does have a pretty high standard for incitement.
Yeah, as it should. Because people, whatever. It's very tough case.
But like I just don't see the relevance.
Okay,
it's not a criminal trial. I agree completely that in a criminal trial where somebody can get sent to prison, be stripped of their liberty and put in a cage, that you need to meet a very high bar of evidence to show that they be very clear that they intended.
But that's what you're missing. That's
effect,
what I think.
That's not what this is. This is about like whether somebody is sanctioned by Congress and doesn't get to hold power again.
Well, I think you're missing.
It's just not even comparable.
I think you're missing something very important, respectfully. I think you're missing that it's not just Trump who's on trial here. What's also on trial here is whether or not, if it were that a majority of Americans wanted to express their democratic rights by electing this man president in the future, we're going to take that away from them. And that extraordinary...
He was trying to get people to take that away from all the people who voted for Joe Biden.
Yes, he was.
That's why he can't run again. Because he won't respect the winner, the legitimate winner of the election.
Listen, come on. What I'm saying is that it's not just about...
I thought this would be funnier.
It's not just...
You guys are kind of boring. I mean, like this is the comedy seller. Like, this is a comedy. I mean, there's a lot of comic reasoning going on, but like that there's some laughable lines of thought that I'm suffering through. But this isn't funny,
dude. I don't know why you're being nasty. I'm not
like I because I don't know why you had me on here to hector me. You don't watch the freaking thing, and then you're making these high-handed judgments about whether they met your high personal standards. You didn't even watch it.
Okay,
why do I have to listen to you? It's dumb.
I get it. You're a name caller, and you.
No, I'm not. And
I want to tell you the following.
Sack up, Noam. You're the one who's people need to be, not be snowflakes and take jokes.
I never.
Right? Like you invite me on the Comedy Cellar podcast. I just didn't know I was just that it was going to be such a not very constructive conversation.
Are you going to let me in, or are you just going to keep filibustering? I want to say.
Go ahead.
I don't want to lay credentials out on the table. I want to tell you the following. I'm as smart as you are. I can guarantee you. All right. And I'm as well educated as you are. And I don't say stupid things. You may find them laughable. You ought to examine yourself if you find them laughable, because I don't say anything that you saying is laughable. I don't think anything you're saying is laughable. I respect you even if I disagree with you. And we have a totally different view of how we view people who disagree with us. I think that I'm listening to you much more in good faith than you are to me. I was trying to make a point that it's very easy to get caught up in thinking this is about Trump.
I was just saying I thought this would be
I'm almost
fun.
finished. It's very important we get caught up in Trump's right to a standard of proof and all that. And I'm saying it's easy to say Trump's not entitled to a standard of proof. But I'm saying, yes, but maybe the American people, if we, in the end, what this is really about is not about Trump anymore, but about telling them, even if you want this as a democracy, you can't have it. That has to have a high standard of proof. Whether, and that's why there's 2/3. That's why it's a 2/3 majority. And when we view it that way,
right? If you get 2/3,
it's a different way to think about it. And if you find it laughable, just like you think my opinion on COVID, I mean, what can I say? I know people like you. I'm sorry you turned out to be that way. If you think I'm stupid,
like what way?
I'm
just saying, I thought we were going to have a different kind of conversation.
Well, that's fine, but that's not all you're saying.
If you wanted to have I spend most of my time having just civil thoughtful conversations about ideas.
After this is over, I'm going to release you to your bubble. I don't know what to say.
And I'm not in a bubble, man. I spent most of my professional career working with the right.
Some of the things that
I'm just saying
that I'm saying are
I don't find your mode of discourse very constructive. I would like to talk about these ideas.
Some of the things
in a serious way, but I feel like I'm just being ranted at.
Some of the arguments that I've made are...
You guys put up with this every week?
Some of the look what you're doing. Some of the arguments.
Like, I would love to hear from these guys. Like, what are they even doing here?
I'm going to let them speak right now. Some of the arguments that I made
There's a mouse
are
in my apartment.
agreed
As we
with.
speak. I have bigger problems. And you know, I have fucking 2 mouse traps in here. And then,
Dan,
yeah.
some of the arguments that I agree with are agreed with by people who you would not dare call laughable. I'll leave it at that. Dan, what do you want to say? Dan Naturman, go on.
I want to say that I saw a mouse, and that's a big deal. And I have 2 mouse traps, and they're not working. That's number 1.
Get him, Dan.
Number 2, what I'd like to say is you got to admit, Noam, when somebody says, hey, do you want to come on the Comedy Cellar podcast, it's not ridiculous that they would think it would be a little more lighthearted and a little funnier.
Okay.
So we do have a branding issue.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It got contentious. So what?
Number 3, I think I don't think that he was hectoring you, Will. I think he was arguing or debating, and you know, that was my take on it. As far as what am I doing here, I think that's a good question, a fair one. At least as far as today's episode is concerned. Although oftentimes I do have more to say. Before you got here, we were talking about Dave Chappelle, and I did do a lot of the talking. There, I felt that Chappelle was good for him if he was able to get more money out of Comedy Central. But I didn't think he was a victim. That was my take on that issue. As far as you know,
I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah, well, the first
Seriously.
part. Okay, but that's it. You know, I'm not the political. I don't handle the political end of this show. I handle the comedy, anything related to comedy and rodents in my apartment. I cover.
We live at a bad time. I'm telling you this. We live at a bad time where people feel very free to make ad hominem attacks of one kind or another, and they think that they, you know, that's appropriate. I strongly disagree with that. I fight against that.
Anyway, I think
like we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Like I make my argument, and then you just keep going. Right, like I make it again. You keep going. You don't actually address the objections. You just repeat what you said before. Right? Like,
I think he was. I think he was addressing the objections. It's just when 2 people don't see eye to eye, that's what happens inevitably.
I think I actually agreed with a lot of what you said. That's why I didn't address it.
I argue with people for a living. It usually doesn't go like this.
A lot of things you said I agreed with, and that's why I didn't address it. But I was trying to. When I told you, I'm not going to repeat it. I found certain. I'm trying to approach it in an orderly way, and certain questions get short shrift. The first question in my mind has got to be, what does it mean to have an article of impeachment if it doesn't really matter whether it's proven or not? What is the trial there to prove? What does it matter what incitement means? If it is incitement, did people, and I'm trying to, you know, come to a conclusion in my own mind. I don't know. I don't know what I have to be ashamed of. I don't know.
No, you don't.
Well,
I
don't want. I mean, if I'm actually a laughable thinker, you know, I got to take stock.
I don't think you're a laughable thinker. Does anybody have anything to say about mousetraps?
Say something funny, goddammit, Dan.
Huh?
Say something funny.
Well, I have been, I thought, but also you don't lay the groundwork for funny when you get into these political discussions necessarily. But
is this what it's like to go to the Comedy Cellar?
It's even funnier.
No, well, the Comedy Cellar we have
laughable.
Comedy Cellar consists of 2 elements.
Is it like Fox News?
Well, here's the thing: the Comedy Cellar has
like live.
No, the Comedy Cellar has a comedy club downstairs, and the comics range from left wing to middle of the road. Some of them are right wing, but they don't really express it on stage. And upstairs is a restaurant where people do have debates and discussions, some of which are like what you've experienced tonight, others of which are...
Can I say something right-wing vis-a-vis impeachment?
Yeah.
Huh?
What did I say that was right-wing?
Well, I don't know. I didn't bring up.
I mean, it's a kind of right-wing which would flip to left-wing if...
You keep asserting an irrelevant standard that, according to which acquittal is justified, and you keep reasserting it despite the fact that I just keep telling you that it's not relevant.
I'm sure
because
I
it's a
find people
political
saying,
proceeding and not a judicial proceeding.
I'm
And
sure
you
I
keep
could find
ignoring
people-
that point,
I'm sure
but
I
it's
find,
just correct.
I'm sure I could
I
find.
think what he's saying is that
I'm sure I
regardless,
could find people saying some of the same things on behalf of Bill Clinton back in the 90s. Some of the same right-wing positions were left-wing positions back then.
I think what he's saying also is that whatever the standard is and what the standard should be might not be the same thing. And he's saying that perhaps the standard should be more like a criminal trial.
Yeah, but that's also what I was saying, is that that is sort of what the norm is, and that is what the Democratic House managers treated it as. And they did a very good job. It doesn't bother me if people don't agree with it, but like, I just don't want to keep hearing the point that they should have done what they did.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know if it's terribly productive to continue this discussion.
No. I'll talk about something. Anything funny to talk about?
All right, well, let's just wrap it up.
Well,
right?
Some dick jokes, Periel.
We've been on the air. We've been not on the air, but we've been talking for 2 hours. If Will would like to leave, he's certainly welcome to. I don't want him to feel like he's hostage. I did want to.
I like Will. I don't know why he gets like that. I would still like to hang out with him and drink.
The way you are?
No,
I mean, like,
I
I'm not
no,
like
Will.
like
I don't
that.
think I will.
You're complaining about ad hominems and that you're doing it.
Intellectually
You're doing
honest,
it.
if you're intellectually honest, you're gonna have to admit one thing. I never said anything personal about you, and you said quite a few things personal about me. That's the bottom line. And
You just.
that's the bottom line.
Like, what was it? What did I say personal?
Yeah, you said, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm laughable. I can pull rank. Or it's like, all right, I don't know what I'm talking about. All right, that's fine.
You also said he was like your uncle. Now I don't know if that was an age thing. I don't know.
No, I don't know that he's even any older than I am. But
he's about.
It's just like the persistent hectoring tone and the kind of immunity
to be quite honest,
the force of the point that's being made to you.
To be quite honest, I've been really wondering about this stuff because it's really bothered me. I mean, I would like to say, after what happened, good riddance, and he deserves it, and he was guilty. But they just put it in front of me in a way. I'm like, well, why do they have to give it to me this way? When I went to law school, and I know that incitement has a particular meaning, and this is a trial, and the Supreme Court justice is supposed to oversee it, and it's supposed to have intent, and it's like, shit, why did they put me in that position? And I know goddamn well that if the tables were turned with the exact same issue, the Republicans would be the ones saying he's guilty, and the Democrats would be the ones saying you didn't prove the case, because we know they would flip on a dime for partisan. There's
it's
no
a political proceeding.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but they dressed it up as if it's adherence to principle. There's no adherence to principle here. People are embracing the principle that's convenient right now for the outcome they want, and they'll flip on it. And I'm trying not to be that guy. I'm trying to say, what is the principle that I think ought to be adhered? Don't tell me whether they're impeaching Trump or Obama. I don't even want to know who's being impeached. As a matter of fact, I don't even want to know what he was speaking about. First, tell me what the principle is. And then give me the facts. Once they put me out on a limb on what I think the principle should be about, what the articles mean, what is the definition of incitement, all these things, then tell me what happened, so I'm locked in. Because what happened is everybody works backwards. That's what I'm afraid of.
Would you say that if we were to do a top 10 list of the most acrimonious episodes we've had, that next to the Lauren Duca episode, this comes in at number 1?
Yes. And I feel bad
That's
about
such an
it.
honor. Thank you, guys.
Well, I try not to.
I love Lauren Duca. She's great.
I just don't like whatever. Okay, listen. Well, hopefully, would you come on again if we do a less defensive topic, like something that's more funny or something
I'd
like
love to. Like I thought this was going to be like a shoot the shit kind of thing.
It
like make some jokes about current affairs.
Before
It
you
would have
got
been,
here,
Like so it helps when you're inviting somebody on to give them some reasonable expectations about.
Whoa. Given that I'm the one who actually did that, I think I gave you a very accurate list of bullet points of what Noam wanted to talk to you about. Is that true or not true?
Oh yeah, I just like it doesn't represent the spirit the thing.
All right,
Well, I can't
listen,
be
I'm gonna hold on. No.
Wait,
I'm gonna.
let me just say, I think that you guys are responsible for the spirit in which you're arguing.
No. I'm
the
gonna
guest.
give Will.
I'd like, like I felt like I was denied hospitality.
Listen, Will, I'm gonna agree with Will on that. I mean, I'm gonna say that when I say I agree with him, meaning that I take that as sincere. That this is not the spirit that he thought was going to be, and I'm sorry for that. And actually, what you describe is the normal spirit of our podcast. It's just that you and I got into it, and that crowded out our normal spirit, which is a mixture of.
I mean, and it's kind of weird. These other guys are here, and I keep expecting to like talk to them and get their perspective, and
yeah,
it's just kind of an odd scene, dude.
Yeah, you're right. Good. Danny, what do you say?
Well, I know. There were moments where I wanted to jump in. I was like, you know what? This is going really well, and let's just see where it goes.
Right.
I think we're all happy with where it ended up.
It's a historic.
I think we get to examine. Like we get to sit with like the things that we've said, the kind of people that we are, and and really reassess. Take stock, and move forward as better people. I think we've done a great job at that.
All right. It's a particular time in history where there's a lot of tempers are running high. We're dealing with profound issues, which will become part of American history, and events that are viscerally disturbing. And we know that viscerally disturbing events can cause overshoot. We do know that don't seem like overshoot at the time, and then some future scenario suffers from a precedent, which we look back on and say, well, maybe we should have, maybe that wasn't helpful at that time, although it felt good at that time. These are, these are, I find these interesting things. I don't have particular confidence in my point of view. I'm trying to be open-minded about this. All right. Let's wrap it up. Let's find Periel. Let's try to, because I don't like having bad vibes with people. Let's try to find a good, fun topic that that we can invite Will back on when something funny happens in the news, or something that Will and I will probably agree on, since he's
like, if there's a story with like great animal antics.
Animal antics are great.
Yeah,
Can we touch
just the crazy things kids say.
Do you have a family?
I do. I've got two little kids, 6 and 1.
I have. You see, we should start with that. I have 7. So I have 8, 6, 8. What is it? 8, 7, and 3.
9.
Oh, that's a handful, man.
9,
7, and 3. Yeah, they change every year, so it's hard to keep track of.
Why do they have to have birthdays every year? It's like extremely inconvenient.
So this has been a trying time being home for COVID. Are your kids in school?
Yeah. My 6-year-old goes to a lovely little Montessori school here that has been just incredible in terms of its like the rigor of its, like.
You're in Iowa, Will?
I'm in Iowa, yeah, Iowa City.
And yet, you're from Iowa. You don't seem Iowan to me. But
I am, in fact, from Iowa. I grew up in a little town called Marshalltown, Iowa, where my dad was the chief of police. Most folks with my disposition don't stick around, and I wasn't expecting to come back, but my wife got a job as a professor at the University of Iowa, where she teaches writing.
Iowa, of course, is where they make those tests that the kids take. I don't know if they still take them every year.
They do.
Yeah.
Like the Iowa test.
University of Iowa?
Yeah.
Creative writing?
Yeah, she teaches in the yeah.
Nice.
She's super good.
Yeah, that's the best creative writing program in the country.
I think our editor has some work to do because we have to get this into an hour format for Sirius, but
Periel has written 2 books, by the way, Will.
we should end with.
Yeah?
Steamy
What are your books on, Periel?
Steamy hot memoirs.
I only know about Iowa because I have a bunch of friends who went to grad school there. My books are nonfiction.
Tell the names, tell the titles.
The Only Bush I Trust Is My Own is the first one, and the second one is called
riveting.
On My Knees. Thanks.
On My Knees is the second one. So
those sound really interesting.
They're fun. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Before this is going to get edited a little bit, obviously, but can we just talk to Danny a little bit too and see what's
but when we edit it, can you make sure to edit out Will's arguments? No.
I think we've, I think that's enough. It's been 2 hours.
What do you want to talk to Danny about, real quick?
I just want to say what's going on.
So I enjoy actually just like talking to you about like kids and books you've written and stuff like that. This is nice. I like it.
How are
Danny?
you? Yes. What's going on? How are you? He had a root canal. How's your tooth?
It's. I mean, everything is fine. I mean, I'm just, this podcast is pretty amazing. So I mean, my root canal doesn't stand. It went. All the pain went away. I forgot about the pain.
Well, Danny, Danny has an amazing backstory. He grew up Orthodox Jewish. His parents sent him to gay conversion therapy.
No, my parents did not do that.
He sent himself
something
to
that happened to me when I was 17 years old.
Sorry, yeah.
They had nothing to do with it. When I was 40 years old, I decided to go on my own.
Sorry.
It's a very different thing.
No, you're right. You're
Because
absolutely
when you're 17 years old and you're sent away, it's a whole different ballgame. It's not. I don't agree with that. Actually,
I would love to hear about that experience. Okay. So you went to you elected to go to conversion therapy at 40?
Yes. Which is
like what was that like?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I learned a lot about myself, and then it was over because the place got closed down, and you're not. You're just the whole thing got shut down. Now it's illegal.
But it's a fraud, right? It's got to be a fraud.
It worked for some people. I don't know if it's not. I don't know if it's fraudulent. I mean, there's some people. I know some people who it worked for.
Did you get the results that you were hoping? What result were you hoping for, Danny?
I was hoping to see. I was hoping to become straight.
Yeah.
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 I said, okay, this is what they say. They say that, blah, blah, blah. If you do this, if you do that, if you do this and you do that, we can change you. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Why not? Let's see what it's all about. And but it didn't work.
Why did you want to become straight?
But I learned a lot about stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know too. Yeah, like
what?
Why you wanted to become straight? Like it would make life easier in some ways, or
it was a domino effect. There's a much longer backstory to just that. It wasn't just it's not something I just woke up and did. I became a little more religious. It was a whole thing. I became a little more religious, and then my family's very religious, but I'm not religious like I was at the time. I had no interest in becoming religious like my family is level of religiosity. My mistake was telling my family, my mom and my brothers, that I was becoming religious, and they got very, very excited by it. I was totally secular, and they got very excited with the idea that I was coming back to Judaism, to religion, to God, and then of course with that came the Jewish law of getting married. Men have to get married. It's a Jewish law. You can't get around it. You have to get. It's one.
Oh,
it's
I didn't know
like
that.
Every other law. Women don't have to get married, but men have to get married. So, so then that came up again, and I got sucked into that whole thing, and then I was like, well, I'm gay, so that's not going to work. And then they got very upset that I brought up the gay thing again. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not even there yet. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
I'm sort of reacquainting myself with religiosity, with the Talmud, with Jewish law. That's where I am right now. I'm not interested in getting, and they're like, but you're 40 years old. You're getting older. You should really think about it. Then my brother sends me a link to Jonah, which was a gay conversion therapy. He's like, why don't you check this out? And I did. And then that's how I got involved. So really that
makes total sense to me. But it's the sort of story you wouldn't construct in your head. Like, have you written about that? That's just fucking fascinating, man.
No, I haven't written about it. Even though a lot of people want me to write about it.
Yeah. You don't want to. I mean, because
it's not that I don't want to. you know, I don't know. I don't get the heart of it. Like, I don't understand it accessibly. Like, I don't know how that story can be accessible to people. Like, you know, without people just sort of writing it off like, oh, this guy's, you know, he's just nuts. You know, it was.
Well, when you say that your family got excited that you're coming back kind of into the fold, I mean, were you excited about that too? Did you feel like you'd been kind of like estranged and you were looking forward to a kind of reunion and
interesting. I maybe, but not really, because I didn't become religious for them. I became religious. It was a very true connection for me at the time. It was almost like really like I saw the light. I was in a really good place in my career and in my life. And I just felt like I wanted to just come back to God in a way that I was familiar with. And I grew up Orthodox. I left it many years before. So, so when I wanted to get back in touch with God, I went back to my roots, and my roots were Orthodox. So that's why, but it had nothing to do with my family, although, you know, again, in hindsight, it was a mistake to involve them because they're very, very, you know, right-wing, very conservative, very extreme. And it was a bad move on my part, but it was a mistake that I made, you know, but not really, there are no mistakes. You know, it all worked out the way it's supposed to work out. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great attitude. And that's kind of like, Noam, you'd asked kind of earlier why I seem sort of zen about getting canned. And it's just kind of like, you know, like I'm not a religious person, but like I do kind of feel like it's just like, okay, you know, it's time to move on. Well, like what's next? And it actually made me really excited to like what's the next thing? Like you feel like there's a field of possibility that opens up. Like sure, you're kind of like hurt, you know, you might feel like a little betrayed, but like but you know, like a lot of times when every single time, like I've like left the job, whether it was because I wanted to or not, like it's felt like, you know, like getting out of a semi-toxic relationship, you know, like you don't really realize how much you were suffering until the day when you finally break up and you're like, oh, this is what it feels like to not feel completely oppressed.
You sound like my employees.
It is a good attitude.
Well, the pandemic has the result of which is not me being fired technically, but me not working very much compared to what I had been, you know, the amount I had been working prior to that. And one thing I've learned is that I don't need stand-up in my life. I need people. I need, you know, I like to go to the Comedy Cellar and see people, but stand-up is not something that I feel like I need to do.
So you learned that because you just felt yourself not really missing it?
I don't miss it. A lot of comedians we talked to during the pandemic are saying, oh, I can't wait to go back on stage. Holy shit, I miss it. Oh my God, I'm jonesing to do a set. I'm not jonesing to do a set. I do enjoy the camaraderie going down to the Comedy Cellar and, you know, seeing people and face-to-face real interaction, in-person interaction. But the stand-up, I'm not, I don't find myself missing.
You have a lot of anxiety about whatever.
I do have a lot of anxiety about stand-up. I get stage fright even after all these years. In fact, my stage fright is worse now than it was when I first started. Probably because when I first started, I thought it was a means to an end. And it turns out this is the end. Which is to say, there's no sitcom. There's no, this is it. You know, and so, you know, that has had an effect on me. But
well, Dan also wrote a novel. He spent quarantine in a very.
Well, I had started writing it prior to the quarantine, but
you finished it.
He sent it to me, by the way, but I haven't read it yet, of course. But he sent it to me. That was a big step.
Yeah, that was a step because I don't trust Noam to give me love.
I might be honest. He's definitely afraid I might be.
I don't want him to be honest. If honesty is, you know, and Noam has never appreciated me really.
Yeah, what do you think of my book? Is kind of like, do I look fat in these jeans? Right,
Absolutely.
Like it's just like
you can't.
Like you look perfect.
The minimum you have to say you enjoyed it, and that's a bare minimum. Now, when somebody says they enjoyed your book, that could mean anything from it was the worst piece of shit I ever read to I enjoyed it. That's the range that enjoyed encompasses. If you don't hear the word love, love means love. Somebody said, I loved your book. That means I loved your book. I enjoyed your book means it means anything at all. Anything from it sucked to I enjoyed it.
I'm scared to read it, Dan. I don't want to be put on the spot. I'm scared to read it.
Well, now
I'm curious.
Now you have to read it.
I know. What? Go ahead, Will. What do you want to say?
I just wanted to ask what it's about. Like, I'm curious.
Okay, what it's about is as follows. It's about a stand-up comic / screenwriter. He's an Oscar-winning screenwriter. He won an Oscar for a movie that he had written and acted in, and now he finds himself self-sabotaging his career. When the novel begins, he hasn't worked in several years other than just doing sets at a local comedy club because of various reasons that he's gotten into arguments with industry people, and he's had issues with getting on stage. And then he writes a memoir, and through the memoir writing process, it's like a book within a book. Through the memoir writing process, he learns. It's like therapy for him, and we learn as the reader, and he learns writing the memoir why he is the way, why he has these fears of success and these fears of also with relationships that also fears that he has. So that's more. I don't want to give it. There's some surprises along the way.
That sounds great. I would love to read that.
Yeah, I like that.
Send it to Will. Will you send it to Will? That would be a nice way of.
I've got an MFA in fiction writing. If you want comments.
Send it to Will, Dan.
I've taught creative writing here at Iowa.
Periel, you can send me Will's email. I assume you have it.
Oh,
I would love to read it. That sounds fascinating.
So we have not in its final edited version yet, but it's more or less in its final edit. 90% there.
I from the University of Arizona's creative writing program.
Oh yeah? Like what year?
Well, I don't want to date myself.
No, I'm just asking because like poetry or fiction.
I poetry, but it was just because I started in poetry. I sort of technically it was poetry, but I wound up doing a lot of nonfiction and sort of critical theory and
Do you know someone named Rachel Yoder?
I don't.
Okay. She's got an MFA from Arizona.
Do you know Lana Musa and Jory Graham and Jane Miller? All those guys are like Iowa people.
I know Jory Graham. My thesis advisor went to Arizona at the same time, like David Foster Wallace did.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Antonia Nelson. Yeah.
We got to wrap it up. I'm happy that we turned the corner and
yeah. No, I listen, guys. I apologize for getting chippy.
No.
I really do. I was just like, I'm tired. It wasn't the kind of conversation I wanted to have right now. So like, it's been like 7 degrees below zero, like as a high. I haven't been out of the house in like days. So like, I feel like a captive animal. So sorry for being a bit of a dick. But I really liked actually talking to you guys.
Everybody being very passionate. It was heated, but it was, it was. I thought it was really interesting listening to both of you.
Can I tell you something that will infuriate you on my side about this since you're in COVID, because Periel knows about this. I have a friend who is 60 years old, overweight, blind, HIV positive, and black. The black, I don't think that's relevant, but people seem to think that's relevant in this context. He has had no help whatsoever in getting a COVID vaccination. There's no friggin' number, I finally got him an appointment, but I'm saying, and it's funny, I thought of this guy and I called him because I knew he was on his own, but this city or the state, whoever it is let the most needy people just defend for themselves.
That's terrible.
In a way I can't even comprehend. What would it take for them to go down? And I was joking, like if you want a New York State website, there's a big website now about masturbation, how to have sex during COVID, and they talk about masturbation. Well, I'm like, can you take people? Yeah, take the people off the masturbation detail and maybe put them on the phone getting appointments for people who are old and sick. But
does the New York State website like tell you how to jack off? Have you considered like here's how you do it?
I don't.
Like,
I
what
don't,
does it
I didn't read the
say?
whole thing. You just Google New York State.
Okay, that's fascinating.
But I mean the lack of competence
Yeah.
that we see as a nation everywhere, from Trump, but it doesn't begin in the end. It's everywhere. Is just so disheartening.
The United States a disaster. Like
Yeah.
we've been like one of the worst in the country. Like we've been at the bottom of vaccination rates. Like just
They're
just
throwing out vaccines, right? I mean, they're literally just
a lot. They're not only throwing out vaccines, they have thousands that are just not being used.
No, it's a
Just
I don't
giant
even
clusterfuck.
understand that.
Did you see that story of that like doctor in Texas who like ran around like that they were running like a little like drive-through clinic sort of thing. Not a lot of people came that day, but like and I guess like the vaccines, the kind that he had, they come in like sets of 6 in this like kind of cooler sort of thing, and if you open the cooler, then all of them will spoil within a particular time. But like the last person of the day came in, but like there wasn't a cooler already open, so he had to crack it open. But then he had like a bunch of other doses that would spoil if he didn't use them. So he like rushed around and just found people who like fit the right profile to give the vaccine to, which is exactly what you should do. But then like the Harris County DA like pressed charges against him for stealing the vaccine. And like it's just.
So what happened to him?
Well, you left out one. I think it's an outrage what happened to him, but you left out one pertinent detail, which I think I'm getting. He also gave it to his wife.
Yeah, but she completely fit. Like she was like immunocompromised and older.
Yeah,
like she fit the profile.
Yeah, I knew when I said it, you would think I was like I'm not.
No.
It
is like it seems a little self-serving, right? Like, but the guy's just like this total mensch. Like he spends all his time like volunteering at like charity clinics, and he's like run emergency rooms, and he just does the right thing.
Yeah.
Like and he gets screwed over for it.
So what happened to him? So they pressed
the judge threw it out immediately. It was
Okay,
the judge was kind of like fuck you, DA. But like the fact that he had to go through that at all is just like but I think that's just like indicative. Like there's like a mixture of like incompetence and just sort of like legalistic bureaucratic managerialism. Like you have to fucking do it by the rules, right? Like or like what are we gonna do if you don't do it by the rule? And people just like lose track of like doing the right thing, and that's just like like everything sucks if people are either incompetent or they're incredibly competent at following idiotic rules.
I know. I think we're at a bad time in a lot of ways in this country. I hope that I don't want to get pessimistic, but something is not right everywhere you look. It's I don't know. Maybe it was always this way. Maybe just that we have a much higher powered microscope now with the digital age, and we know everything in a way we didn't used to. And maybe that's, I don't know. Maybe that's just not a good thing.
Yeah.
But
Would you say that we're the worst country in the history of the?
No. Well, you should reach out to speak to Barry, because she's a and by you also called her a conservative. She's not a conservative on anything. I may be a conservative. She's a liberal Democrat by all measures. I understand. I mean, I don't agree with her on many issues. Most. She's she's just a free speecher. But I mean, she's not even a right wing on Israeli politics. She hates Netanyahu. She's a good credentialed liberal. But more importantly, she's just a very, very sweet and kind person.
I would love to talk to her. Yeah.
Apparently, she's dating a woman now, because she was, I think she was married to a man when we knew her, when we interviewed.
She used to date Kate McKinnon, or roommates with Kate.
Yeah.
McKinnon.
Yeah, she dated Kate McKinnon, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
That's it.
What would you say if I told you that I forgot to record this whole episode?
I wouldn't believe
it. Says recording. Don't even. All right, you're gonna.
I would feel like it was worth every second.
This whole last thing with Dave.
Life is ephemeral.
So cut out the episode. Cut out a lot of the fighting. Although the fighting is interesting.
The fighting was interesting. The fighting was interesting.
I thought it was pretty. There were some great moments. I thought there were,
But yeah, make for YouTube. We'll put the whole thing over. For the radio, let's make sure we keep the whole thing with Danny and his conversion therapy story. Let's make Will a friend of the show. I have a lot of friends in my life that started with rough friction.
I mean, I love to argue, and like obviously, yeah. And I love to give people shit while I'm arguing with. I like trash talk, but you kind of have to. But you kind of have to build a context of mutual trust for the trash talk to hit lightly. So
yeah, I don't mind trash talk. If I got next time we meet, I don't think I would interpret the trash talk in the same way. Yeah. Now that I've seen
But I was definitely premature, and so like it was a. So,
all right, so, we have the first part of this conversation, the last part of this conversation first. Even that would have changed the context. All right,
totally.
Listen, guys, be safe, everybody. And well, very, very pleased to meet you. I think what happened to you was fucking ridiculous.
Thanks, I really appreciate that. I really do.
Ridiculous.
All right.
Anyway.
Great to meet you all. Like,
Thank you, everybody.
And I really did enjoy it because, like, I like getting bitchy. So, so it was a lot of fun for me. So thanks for the.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for the chance.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.